Act 1 of Sweet Lavender by Arthur Wing Pinero. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The persons of the play.
Horace Bream, a young American, read by Matthew Reese.
Geoffrey Wedderburn, of Wedderburn, Green and Hoskett, bankers, Barnchester, read by Todd.
Clement Hale, his adopted son, studying for the bar, read by Andrew Hunt.
Richard Dick Fennell, a barrister, read by Andrew James.
Dr. Delaney, a fashionable physician, read by Algie Pug.
Mr. Bolger, hairdresser and wig maker, read by Alan Mapstone.
Mr. Ma, a solicitor, read by Larry Wilson.
Minnie Gilfillian, niece of Mr. Wedderburn, read by Matea Bracic.
Ruth Rold, housekeeper and laundress at No. 3 Brain Court Temple, read by Sonia.
Lavender, her daughter, read by Jen Broda.
Mrs. Gilfillian, a widow, Wedderburn's sister, Minnie's mother, read by Danny Malone.
Stage directions, read by Adrian Stevens. Introductory note. Sweet Lavender must be regarded as one of the most successful stage plays of modern times, and there can be no question that it has proved so far the most popular of Mr. Pinero's works. Its representations may be counted by the thousand, and its popularity has extended over many latitudes. The reason of this is not far to seek. It proclaims itself in the gentle humanity and genial humour of the play, and the lovable creation of the golden-hearted, weak-natured, down-at-heel Dick Fennell. The very simplicity and unpretentiousness of this domestic comedy have apparently disarmed any antagonistic criticism which might have been expected from those critics of cynical temper and pessimistic mood who are wont to look for the stern realities of life even in the most purposely genial of theatrical entertainments. And if these, in view of the preponderance of kindly human nature in the play, elect to regard Sweet Lavender as a sort of modern fairy tale rather than an actual and realistic study of life, certainly no one would be more ready to agree with them than Mr. Pinero himself. He avowedly designed the piece as a pleasant entertainment, and the proof that he accomplished his purpose is the fact of the phenomenally successful career of the work all over the world. Had Mr. Pinero, in the early months of 1888, written a play of the order of The Second Mrs. Tanqueray for Terrace Theatre, the result would, in all probability, have been disaster. Sweet Lavender was first produced on Wednesday evening, March 21st, 1888, and was from the first received with so much enthusiasm that at once the play-going public began to flock to Terrace Theatre. Mr. Pinero's comedy, in fact, drew the town. Mr. Edward Terry's Dick Fennell became almost a household word, and the play held its place in the programme continuously until January 25th, 1890, by which date it had been performed as many as 683 times. But this was not the end of its career at Terrace Theatre, for, after Mr. Edward Terry's holiday trip to India, the actor-manager signalised his return by a revival of Sweet Lavender on October 4th, 1890, and between that date and November 26th of the same year, 54 performances were given, bringing the number of representations at this house up to 737. Act 1, Nobody's Business, morning. Act 2, Somebody's Business, evening of the next day. Act 3, Everybody's Business, a week afterwards. Scene, chambers of Mr. Fennell and Mr. Hale, 3 Brain Court Temple. Springtime, the present day, Scene designed and painted by T. W. Hall. Mr. T. W. Robertson, who, as a manager and actor of considerable provincial experience, was prompt to recognise the certain popularity of Sweet Lavender with the immense playgoing public outside the metropolis, at Christmas 1888 commenced a series of provincial tours with Mr. Pinero's play, and these tours lasted until November 5th, 1891, 697 performances having been given in the meanwhile. Since then, other travelling companies have performed the play many hundred times all over the United Kingdom, and it finds a continuously appreciative public. In America, Mr. Pinero's famous comedy has become a stock piece, and its representations have been countless since Mr. Daniel Frohman first produced it at the Lyceum Theatre, New York. Australia has also taken very kindly to the play, which was first introduced to Antipodean audiences by Mr. Frank Thornton, and during Mr. Edward Terry's recent visit to the colony, Sweet Lavender was naturally expected from him as its original producer, and it was received with enthusiasm at his hands. In South Africa, it has also enjoyed frequent representation. In the West Indies, it has been much in favour, and Mr. Thornton will shortly take the play to India. But Sweet Lavender, like The Profligate and The Magistrate, has appealed beyond the English-speaking body of playgoers to those of the Teutonic and Italian tongues. It has been very frequently performed in Germany in an adaptation which eliminates the sentimental interest to a large extent and lays greater stress on the comic, while the Italian stage knows it also by a version from the pen of a well-known Italian writer. Furthermore, Sweet Lavender was recently acted in Russia by a company organised for the purpose of presenting English plays in that country. Malcolm C. Salomon, October 1893. Sweet Lavender, the first act. The scene is the comfortably furnished sitting-room of some barristers' chambers at 3 Brain Court, Temple. On the spectators' left and right are the doors leading respectively to the bedrooms of Richard Fennell and Clement Hale. At the further end of the room, on the left, is a curtained opening leading into a kind of passage where a butler's tray stands, and facing the outer door of the chambers. The corresponding part of the room, where the windows look on to the court, forms a kind of recess curtained off from the rest. It is a bright spring morning. Ruth Rolt, a slim, delicate-looking woman of about 35, with a sweet face and a sad, soft voice, humbly but very neatly dressed, is laying the breakfast things upon the table. Bulger, a meek, bald-headed man, carrying a little old leather bag, a brass pot of hot water, and some clean towels, enters quietly.
"I've give Mr. Ale a nice shave, Mrs. Rolt. Clean and quick. Water's hot enough for me just to run over Mr. Fennell's face, if he's visible."
I'm afraid Mr. Fennell isn't well enough for you this morning, Mr. Bulger.
Not one of his mornings, eh?
Ruth goes to the right-hand door and knocks sharply.
Mr. Fennell! Mr. Fennell! The barber!
Bulger, mildly, behind his hand.
Hairdresser!
Hairdresser.
With a mournful shake of the head.
No use.
Well, Mrs. Rolt, I do wonder at a superior young gentleman like Mr. Ale stooping to reside with one of Mr. Fennell's sort.
Ruth, firing up.
What do you mean, one of Mr. Fennell's sort?
I mean a person who's seen staggering home with uncertain footfalls at all hours of the morning, and can't hold up his head for shaving more than twice a week.
I shouldn't wonder if Mr. Hale finds something to like, something to respect in Mr. Fennell, with all his faults.
Perhaps so. But to reflect that Mr. Ale used to be such a swell, as the saying goes, over in Pear Tree Court, and then 3 weeks back to come here and take up with the untidiest chin in the inner temple? It's bewildering.
Ruth, impatiently,
Oh,
walks up to the window where she stands waiting for Bulger to go. Bulger, with a sigh.
Good morning, Mrs. Rolt.
Ruth, without turning.
good morning.
Bulger, on his way to the door, pauses, deposits his brass pot and towels on the table, then opens his bag mournfully. Ruth, turning with surprise.
Mr. Bulger,
I'm still hoping, Mrs. Rolt.
it's good to be hoping for something in this world, Mr. Bulger.
Bulger, taking a piece of paper out of his bag and advancing towards Ruth.
My affection for you has now took poetic form, ma'am. Will you accept the heartiest effort?
No, thank you.
Think, Mrs. Rolt. When it comes to poetry, it comes to something. I, Edmund Bulger, widower, have loved you, Mrs. Ruth Rolt, widow, ever since you first set foot in the temple 15 year ago, a-bearing your 2-year-old baby in your arms, ma'am.
Ruth, pained.
Don't.
I was the first what ever put scissors to your little Lavender's silky head, Mrs. Rolt.
Yes, I know that.
And I've had the handling of your tresses too. Aye, and the singeing of 'em, till I found I loved you too fond to do your hair what I call justice.
Gloomily offering his verses.
And now it's come down to poetry.
Ruth, turning away.
It's no good indeed.
Bulger, surveying the paper doubtfully.
It ain't much good, but intellectually it's my all, ma'am. You won't?
No, Mr. Bulger, please.
Bulger, putting away the paper and taking up his things.
A John signed die, ma'am.
Turning solemnly.
I take leave for to mention that Mr. Justice Tyler's new wig, which I sent home yesterday, nips him at the nape of the neck. Also that I cut Mr. Pritchett, the eminent QC's chin, in his own chambers yesterday. A mole as I've skipped over these 10 years like a gladsome child. I don't want to make a mountain out of a mole, Mrs. Rolt, but these facts denote the failing hand, ma'am. Good morning.
As Bulger is going, there is a knock at the outside door, which he opens, and admits Dr. Delaney, a genial old Irish gentleman with silvery grey hair and whiskers.
Thank ye. I'm much obliged to ye. I'm calling on Mr. Hale.
Bulger goes out.
Is it Mrs. Rolt?
Yes, sir.
I'm Dr. Delaney. I've just had the pleasure of seeing your daughter downstairs in the kitchen, in the basement.
My daughter?
The fact is, I'm a friend of Mr. Hale's, and when I met him, a night or two back at a little party, he told me that the child of his laundress, of the lady who minds the house, where he has chambers, was looking a little peaky, and that if ever I was near the temple—
Oh, how good of Mr. Hale.
Oh, delightful of him.
And you too, Doctor.
Dr. Delaney, taking her 2 hands in his for a moment.
Don't speak of it. Not a bit. Mr. Hale isn't out of his bed yet, I take it.
Yes, Doctor. He'll breakfast in a minute.
She goes to a door and knocks. Dr. Delaney, to himself.
No, I wonder whether this boy is smitten with the bit of a girl downstairs. Ah, thank goodness, it's no business of mine.
Ruth, knocking again.
Mr. Hale!
Clement, in his room.
Yes.
Dr. Delaney, please.
Oh, thank you. I'm coming.
Ruth continues laying the table. Dr. Delaney, to himself.
It would be a great disappointment to Wedderburn, the banker, if the lad he's adopted did anything absurd. But, thank goodness, it's no business of mine.
Don't you think my girl is looking very pale, Doctor?
Ah, don't worry yourself now. It's the air of the temple. She's a white chrysanthemum instead of a pink one. Your daughter's strong enough.
Bless you for telling me that, my sweet Lavender.
You're a little pale yourself now.
Oh, I've had trouble.
Oh, you're a widow. I'm sorry to hear, Mrs. Rote.
Yes, Doctor.
Dr. Delaney, to himself.
And you're right about the trouble you've had, if I'm any judge of faces. Thank goodness, it's no business of mine.
To Ruth.
Have you been alone a long while?
I lost Lavender's father before she was born.
Ah, that's a pity now.
And she's all I have in the world, Doctor. In fact, she's myself. At times I think she's as old as I, or I as young as she. I feel her smile on my face, and the pains and aches I suffer go to her young bones. When she is poring over her lessons at night, I am sure my eyes smart for it.
Her lessons? What lessons are those?
She's a little backward, and works hard with her books in the evening. Mr. Hale has been good enough to help her.
Oh, has he? And she's very fond of her books. Have you noticed?
Yes, very.
Then the only thing I've got to recommend is this, that you'll put a stop to the lessons for 6 months or so.
Very well, Doctor. Poor Lavy.
Dr. Delaney, to himself.
I've hit it. Oh, thank goodness, this is no business of mine.
Clement Hale enters. He is a handsome, boyish young man of about 23, immaculately dressed in a fashionable dressing suit.
Dr. Delaney!
Me dear boy.
They call you a fashionable physician, and you're found in the city at 10 in the morning.
Me dear boy, I'll let you into a secret. We can't get human ailments to keep fashionable hours.
Clement, leading him over to the armchair.
Best-hearted and best-humoured creature in London, sit in the best chair.
Dr. Delaney has seen Lavender. I can't thank you.
Clement, smiling.
Please don't.
With assumed carelessness to Delaney.
What do you think of the child?
Oh, she's been increasing her knowledge a little too rapidly, that's all.
Lavender has to give up her lessons for 6 months, the doctor says. Isn't it a pity, Mr. Hale?
Ruth goes out.
Give up her lessons?
No, it's no good overloading the brain of a young girl. No, is it?
Clement, carelessly turning away.
No.
Dr. Delaney, to himself.
No, nor the heart neither. Good gracious! Here's poor Wedderburn travelling abroad in happy ignorance, and it's nobody's business to look after the boy he loves like a son. Well, it's not my business, at any rate.
There is the sudden sound of the fall of some heavy object in the adjacent room.
What's that now?
That? Oh, that's Dick.
Dick, is it?
Mr. Richard Fennel, barrister at law. I share his chambers. Dick's dressing.
Dropped his waistcoat.
Poor Dick. If you saw him, I dare say you'd be shocked at my making a companion of a man like Dick Fennel.
Dear me.
But I know the good there is in old Dick, and how the good burns clearer and brighter in his slovenly person than many who've had luck and love and luxury in their lives. Which Dick hasn't. I shall pull him around yet. Like to know him?
I like to know everybody.
Clement, opening the door slightly.
Dick!
To Delaney.
You won't see him to advantage. I was busy last night, and he ran off the rails a little. Dick!
Turning away from the door.
All right.
Dick Fennel enters and walks unsteadily towards Clement. Dick is a shattered and dissolute-looking man of about 45, with shaggy iron-grey hair and ragged whiskers, a pale and cadaverous face, and a suggestion of redness about the nose. He wears the wreck of a once gaudy smoking jacket, which hangs loosely upon him, and his appearance has generally a down-at-heel appearance. But, withal, he presents the remains of a gentleman, and, after he has recovered himself, his manner, though eccentric, is refined and good-humoured.
Clem, my boy, good morning.
Hello, Dick. Hello.
I know what you infer, Clem. I'm a little late in falling. I mean in rising. This morning.
Clement, with mock severity.
A little early in going to bed this morning, Mr. Fennel.
Clem, my boy, you're so unreasonable. I had an important appointment at the Steak and Talbots in Fleet Street, a very early established inn, Clem, Dr. Johnson, and all that sort of thing. I'm none the worse for it, Clem.
Are you any the better?
I'm about the same, Clement.
Let me introduce my friend, Dr. Delaney.
What nonsense, Dr. Johnson.
Dr. Delaney.
Dick, to Delaney.
I beg your pardon. I didn't perceive you when I first came in.
He walks rather unsteadily to Delaney, shakes hands with him, then sits on the sofa.
Delighted to make your acquaintance, Mr. Fennel.
Thank you. Were you here when you heard that noise in the next room?
I heard a noise.
The pattern on my bedroom carpet. Damn annoying. I had the carpet turned last week. Bottom upwards. Still damn annoying pattern. Different pattern, but pattern. Trip of anybody.
Dr. Delaney, to Clement.
I happen to have a little something in me pocket that'll pull him together.
Give it to him, for heaven's sake.
I want a tumbler.
Tumbler? Tumbler.
Dick goes rapidly to the sideboard and fetches a tumbler and a decanter of spirits.
Look out!
Delaney takes the tumbler and decanter from Dick and hands the decanter to Clement, who replaces it on the sideboard. Retaining the tumbler, Delaney measures into it some drops from a phial he has taken from his pocket. Dick, mystified.
Perfect conjuring trick.
Clement, offering a carafe of water.
Water?
Very little.
Delaney pours some water into the tumbler, then gives it to Dick.
Swallow that now.
Not spirits, I hope, at this time of the morning.
No.
Why not?
That's the blessed antidote to the vilest poison the devil ever put his red seal on. I allude to Scotch whisky, not Irish.
What nonsense. Blessed anecdote.
Come, drink my health, sir.
The Queen!
Dick drinks the contents of the tumbler, then coughs and splutters.
How's that now?
One's keeping another year, at least. Oh.
Dick writhes a little, as if in pain, then sits on the sofa and buries his head in his hands.
He's all right. I'm off.
Ruth enters with a tray.
You won't have breakfast with us, Dr. Delaney?
God bless ye for asking me, but I'm very busy over this new hobby of mine. You've heard of it? The Home of Forgetfulness.
The Home of Forgetfulness? What's that?
It's a new home I've endowed for 100 soft-hearted women who are willing to put themselves at my beck and call to nurse the sick and ailing rich and poor. I shall be the commander-in-chief with a trained army at me own barracks.
And you do this all alone?
Ah, why not? Some of us so-called fashionable physicians have made so much money out of those who haven't anything the matter with them that it's hard if we can't do a little for the benefit of those who have.
But why the Home of Forgetfulness?
Because it's only by a bed of sickness that many a woman can forget the trouble and pain and disappointment this world has brought her.
Taking Clement's hand.
God bless ye, me boy.
God bless you, Dr. Delaney. I wish more of us were like you.
Go along now. Goodbye.
Looking at Clement, then at Dick.
It's no business of mine.
He bustles out, brushing past Ruth. Ruth, under her breath, to Delaney as he passes her.
Doctor.
He passes through the passage, she following him. Clement, calling after Delaney.
Goodbye!
Dr. Delaney, in the distance.
Goodbye.
Dick, having roused himself with a shake and a shiver, looks up, blinking his eyes, his drunkenness gone.
Clem.
Going to the table and lifting up the dish cover.
Sweetbread. We haven't had breakfast. Clem.
Clement closes the passage door and, drawing the curtain over the opening, comes to the table.
Hello.
You're always late for breakfast, Clement.
Clement, putting his hand on Dick's shoulder and surveying him.
Delaney understands your case, evidently.
Delaney?
That was Cormac Delaney, the dear old doctor of Wigmore Street.
Oh, I wish you had introduced me. Shall we toss for the armchair, as usual?
Certainly.
Clement tosses a coin and catches it on the back of his hand, covering it.
Call!
Dick throws his coin in the air. It falls many yards away from him, but he covers the back of his hand as if he had caught the coin. Clement laughs. Dick, uncovering his hand, disappointed.
Oh, never mind, woman.
Yours.
Dick sits in the armchair. Clement helps Dick to sweetbread, then pours out tea.
No appetite, I suppose?
Dick, as if with a disagreeable taste in his mouth.
Ham. I fancy my liver isn't as it should be.
Ah, Dick, you've broken your word to me again.
The last time, Clement, my boy. The last time.
It's always the last time, Dick.
Dick, making a clatter with his knife and fork irritably.
Don't talk childishly. Last night was the last time. It will be the last time. You're invariably finding fault, Clement. It's discouraging. Blame. But praise? Oh dear, no.
Praise for what?
Dick, bitterly.
It is hardly for a man of my age to indicate to a boy the particular qualities.
Appealingly.
Clem, I'm sorry. There, I apologise. Never again.
Holding out his hand.
Friends, Clement, my boy. Word of honour, my boy.
Clement, gripping his hand.
Word of honour, Dick.
Done. But do try to commend a little more, Clement, to praise, to encourage. Much may be done by kindness.
Cheerfully.
Sweetbread?
Clement, absently.
No thanks, Dick.
Off your feed. Spoonful of whiskey in your tea. Tone the stomach.
Dick, Delaney says that little Lavender Rolt ought to discontinue her studies.
Oh.
Clement, leaving the table.
Confound it! When she is making such progress!
Clement sits with his elbows on the writing table and his head resting on his hand.
Hello, Clement, my boy.
Going over to Clement sympathetically.
This won't do.
What won't do?
Clem, no man is quite so sober as the individual who is occasionally otherwise. All his acuteness is concentrated upon his brief, lucid intervals, and in those intervals his acuteness is devilish.
Laying his hand on Clement's shoulder.
Clement!
Dick!
When you took compassion upon a worthless, broken-down reprobate, I allude to the gentleman now honoured with the attention of the house, you did a fine thing, but don't spoil it, Clement, my boy.
What do you mean? What is there to spoil?
Your career. Don't you think I haven't seen this coming on? You're giving little Lavender hints in grammar and composition and buying her Boyle's arithmetic and explaining the difference between a cape and an isthmus in the dusk by the window. No, Clement, my boy, it won't answer. For the sake of her peace of mind, your future, pull up before the mischief is done.
Clement, taking Dick's hand.
You're too late, Dick. I love her.
Dick, spluttering with anger and shaking his fist at Clement.
Out of my chambers. This is gratitude. This is how you profit by the counsel and companionship of a man double your age. I've done with you.
Very well, Dick.
Dick, rushing at him.
Clement, my boy, I'm a little angry now.
Tearfully.
But I shall work round, Clem. You haven't breathed a word to the poor child, have you?
Not a word, Dick.
Thank you, Clem. Lavie must be sent into the country for the benefit of her health, and then there'll be an end of it.
Dick, why should there be an end of it?
Don't talk to me, sir, like that. Haven't you been adopted by Mr. What's-his-name, a banker, sir?
Well?
If a banker should adopt me, you'd see something like behaviour, sir. Why, if you offend your father, as you call him, you'll be a pauper. You'll be like Richard Fennel, Esquire of the Inner Temple.
Why should I offend Mr. Wedderburn by loving a girl who is simple and honest and generous and courtly, whose only vice is that she is not dressed by a Bond Street milliner?
Don't go to me when you're starving, that's all.
Nonsense, Dick. At the worst, I shall have my profession.
Profession? What good is a profession to me?
Snatching a dirty pipe from the mantelpiece savagely.
Besides, aren't you engaged to a beautiful, Miss Thingamy, Mr. Wedderburn's niece?
Mrs. Gilfillian's daughter and I were thrown together as children, and I believe there is some idea...
Ha! You believe?
But I'm sure that Minnie Gilfillian troubles her pretty head very little about me.
Hadn't you better wait till Miss Gilfinian and Mrs. Gilfinian and Mr. Wedderburn bring their 3 pretty heads back to England?
Wait! I can't stop the beating of my heart, Dick. And it beats lavender, 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 every moment of the day.
He buries his head in his hands.
One last word, Clement, my boy.
Slowly and carefully filling his pipe.
The story of Cinderella hasn't been properly told yet. There was no pumpkin and no fairy. The carriage came from Windover's, and the pair of bays from Tattersall's. At the young gentleman's order, the girl was pretty and good, and he loved her, Clement. But the time arrived when the slippers wore down to the heel and had to be replaced by a size larger. And by, it's a sad story, he noticed that her little sharp elbows didn't get whiter, poor thing, and that she mixed up the first and third person in accepting Lady Montmorency's kind invitation to dine. And one day a carriage and pair were for sale, Clement, as good as new, the property of a gentleman leaving England, who was no longer answerable for the debts contracted by Cinderella, his wife.
The hero of your story was a cad, Dick.
The hero of any story generally is. There, take my sermon or leave it. But it's because I love you, and because this poor woman, Ruth Rolt, has been for 15 years a great friend to a shaggy, worthless cur, that I won't let you and her child make each other wretched without raising any bark against them. Amen, Clement, my boy. Amen.
He drops into the armchair facing the fire and lights his pipe. There is a low knock from the other side of the curtained opening.
There's that man of mine, Jenks. He gets later and later every morning.
Dick, growling.
Learn to dress yourself. I dress myself.
The knock is repeated. Clement, angrily.
Come in.
Lavender, a slight pretty girl about 17, shabbily dressed, draws the curtain and enters the room. Her voice is sweet and gentle, and her movements graceful and refined. She carries some school books, an exercise book, and a small tray. Lavender, standing unnoticed, timidly.
May I clear the table, please?
Dick, turning in his chair.
Hello.
Clement, jumping up.
Good gracious! We thought you were Jenks.
Lavender, taking a little crumpled note from her pocket.
Jenks has left this note downstairs, Mr. Hale.
Clement, reading.
Henry Jenks presents his respectful compliments, but I am not coming any more, as I... Hand that to Mr. Fennel, Lavender.
Lavender gives the note to Dick. Dick, reading.
I am not coming any more, as I can't stand the carryings on of that awful Mr. Fennel.
Indignantly.
Well,
He screws up the note vindictively and throws it into the fire. Then turning, he sees Lavender and Clement close together. Lavender, giving the books to Clement reluctantly.
You won't look at my exercise till I've cleared the breakfast table and gone right out of sight, will you?
Why?
It's so blotty.
Dick, fidgeting.
Clement, my boy.
Admonishing Clement by waving his pipe. Lavender goes to the breakfast table and begins removing the things. Clement, angrily.
Don't interfere, Dick.
Thank you, Mr. Hale.
Stalking away indignantly. Clement, to himself.
Confound Dick's cynicism. How sweet she is.
To Lavender.
May I help you in some way?
He takes up the teapot.
No, thank you.
Taking the teapot from Clement and looking at his empty plate.
Poor Mr. Fennel hasn't eaten any breakfast.
Ah, poor Mr. Fennel.
She carries some of the breakfast things out into the passage and puts them on the butler's tray. Clement hesitates a moment, then snatches up an egg cup and goes after her. Dick, looking round.
Where?
Going to the curtained opening.
Ah, Clement, my boy.
Clement returns to the room, glaring at Dick, and stands sulkily before the fire. Lavender goes on clearing the table. Dick throws himself on the sofa, opens the newspaper, and eyes Clement and Lavender from behind it.
Do you know that your books are to be closed, Lavender?
My books?
Pounds, shillings, and pence are to be withdrawn from your mental banking account. The intricate verb will torture you no longer, and the mountains of this world will have to settle their relative height amongst themselves.
I was afraid I was becoming too troublesome to you, Mr. Hale.
My dear child, it's not my doing, but Dr. Delaney's.
Oh, how cruel! He doesn't know how ignorant and stupid I am.
She returns to the passage in tears. Clement, savagely, to Dick.
There!
I think of your health, Lavy. Health should be the first consideration of us all.
Lavender returns, wiping her eyes to brush away the crumbs.
But I've a capital notion. If you may not read, there's nothing to prevent you from being read to.
Eh?
And so, Lavender, every evening for a couple of hours, I'll grind out some sound instructive work, and you shall sit and listen to me.
Oh, Mr. Hale, how good you are.
I'll lay in a stock of books this morning. We'll begin on Frederick the Great by Carlyle.
21 volumes?
Lavender, having cleared the table, now removes the white cloth and begins to fold it. Clement, advancing.
Allow me?
Thank you, Mr. Hale.
Clement takes an end of the tablecloth opposite Lavender. Dick savagely screws the paper into a ball and flings it away. There is a sharp rat-a-tat at the outer door. Dick, taking Lavender's end of the tablecloth from her.
Go to the door, Lavy.
Clement folds the cloth angrily with Dick. Lavender opens the door and admits Horace Bream, a good-looking, well-dressed, fair-haired young American. Horace, at the door.
Thank you. Mr. Hale? Thank you.
Advancing and looking from Clement to Dick.
You'll excuse me, I hope, but being rather in a hurry.
To Dick.
Hale?
Dick dropping his end of the tablecloth.
No, Fennel!
Horace, to Clement.
Mr. Hale, I am perfectly delighted to make your acquaintance. Permit me to carry this through with you.
Placing his hat and stick on the floor, he picks up the end of the tablecloth and folds it with Clement, who glares at him in annoyance. Dick sits on the sofa, chuckling. Lavender is seen from time to time in the passage, taking away the breakfast things.
Really, I haven't the pleasure of...
Horace Pinkley Bream.
Well, but...
I have the honor to be a great personal friend of your aunt, Mrs. Gilfillian, and her daughter Minnie.
Warmly.
Sir, most charming ladies.
Oh, pray sit down.
Horace, sitting.
I'm in a very great hurry.
Have you any message from...
Horace, unconcernedly.
No, sir, I have not.
Clement, commanding himself.
Then would you mind telling me...
Horace, looking at his watch.
Certainly. The fact is, your party picked me up in Paris 2 months ago.
What party?
Mr. Wedderburn, his sister, Mrs. Gilfillian, and her daughter. Sir, charming ladies. From Paris we traveled to Marseille, from Marseille to Cannes, Cannes to Nice. They just stuck to me right through.
Looking round.
Sir, I am delighted with your apartments.
Clement, to himself.
An intrusive table to acquaintance.
To Horace.
You've left my friends at Nice, I presume?
No, sir. We are home.
Home?
I brought Mrs. Gilfillian and her daughter right through to London yesterday. Charming ladies.
Dick, to himself.
Hello.
Clement, under his breath.
Confound it!
We left Wedderburn in Paris buying things. An exceedingly pleasant gentleman.
Clement, distractedly.
And where are Mrs. Gilfillian and her daughter now?
That's my difficulty. Where? I lost them at Charing Cross Station last night. Having heard them frequently talk about you, I dug up your old apartments in Pear Tree Court, where I found your notice of removal. You have not seen Mrs. Gilfillian yet?
No, sir.
Thank you. Good morning.
Presenting a card to Clement.
You have not been on our side, probably.
No.
Sir, you'll just love New York.
Shaking hands with Clement warmly.
I regret that I am rather in a hurry.
Handing a card to Dick and shaking hands.
Sir, good morning. You'll hear from me the very moment I've discovered these charming ladies.
But pardon my putting it so plainly. Perhaps they don't want you to discover them.
Horace, looking at his watch.
Sorry, I can't discuss that question just now. I'm rather in a hurry.
He goes out quickly.
Clem, my boy, Mrs. Gilfillian and her daughter are in London. The hand of fate.
I'll be happy to see them, Dick, and to shake the hand of fate. If I'm not in when they call, say I'll be back in half an hour.
I don't like your look, Clem. What are you going to do?
Do, Dick. I'm going out to buy Frederick the Great by Carlyle.
He goes into his bedroom. Lavender appears in the passage. Dick, calling after Clement.
Leave my chambers today. I've done with you.
To himself.
If Ruth could only afford to send little Lavy away for the benefit of her health, what a solution it would be. I think I could contrive it. If only I had a few pounds to spare, but if I had a few pounds to spare, I couldn't spare them. Lavender.
Lavender takes the folded tablecloth from the table and puts it away in the sideboard. Clement, thinking.
Cripps has a fellow reading to him who wants to buy a little library.
Looking towards the bookshelves.
That's my little library. The last remains of the time when, if Cripps' pupil is good for £15, I'll lend 'em to Ruth Rolls, and Lavy shall leave town.
Eyeing Lavender.
Brighton into 15 quid won't go. Broadstairs into 15 quid, 4 weeks and 1 day over.
Shaking his fist at the books.
Come on.
Taking down the books savagely.
I'll teach you to remind me of the time when I was a promising lad like Cripps' pupil.
Lavender, watching him in surprise.
May I help you, Mr. Fennel?
Dick drops a book and looks guiltily at Lavender.
For sale, Lavy. Library of Richard Fennel, Esquire of the Inner Temple, barrister at law, 50 volumes.
Lavender, sympathetically.
Oh.
Laying her hand on his arm.
Must you?
Dick, hesitatingly.
Well,
Looking at Lavender, then towards Clement's door, stroking her hair.
I think I'd better, Lavy.
Poor Mr. Fennel. Shall I hand you the books?
Dick, to himself.
She makes me feel guilty. Lavy, if your mother could afford it, would you like 3 or 4 weeks in the country?
Oh, no.
No?
She hands him volume after volume from the bookcase. After looking at the title pages, he throws them onto the floor.
The temple is the country. We have trees and grass and birds and flowers.
Seaside, then?
No, we have a river with boats on it.
Poor Lavy. Think of fresh air, fresh eggs, fresh milk from the cow. We're all apt to underrate the importance of milk from the cow.
No, I'm happy here. So happy.
Dick, to himself.
Thinking of him.
Why do you look at the title pages?
I'm sorting my property from the other young gentleman's, Mr. Hales.
Oh, let me do it. I'll look for Mr. Hale's name. I'll take care you don't sell any of his. May I?
Very well, Lavy.
She takes a quantity of books from the shelves, places them on the ground and kneels amongst them. Dick, to himself.
It's like setting her to sign her own death warrant. Cripps is in court today in the Baxter case. I'll run over and see him.
He goes quickly to the outer door, opens it, then returns, leaving the door slightly open.
Going out without dressing. I'm upset. I'm doing the mean thing.
Looking towards Lavender, tearfully.
Poor Clem. Poor Lavy.
He goes into his bedroom. Lavender examines the books and makes a neat pile of them as she hums a song happily. Clement, fashionably dressed for walking, enters, unheard by Lavender, and watches her. Clement, to himself.
She makes a room seem like a garden.
Lavender, taking up a book.
Smith's Leading Cases.
Opening it.
Looks rather dry. No conversation.
She puts it aside. Clement, to himself.
Why should I hold my tongue?
He silently draws the curtain over the opening without noticing that the door leading on to the outer passage is open. Lavender, taking up another book.
Benjamin on Sales. Biblical. Richard Fennell.
Clement goes to Dick's door, listens, and then quietly turns the key. Lavender, with another book.
Williams on the Law of Real Property. Clement Hale. Ah.
She opens the middle of the book.
Incorporeal Hereditaments. What a beautiful book!
She settles herself a little nearer the window and reads earnestly. Clement comes and sits upon the pile of books beside her.
Lavender.
With a low cry of fright, she turns slowly and looks at him.
What are you doing there, Mr. Hale?
I've come to sit with you in the garden.
The garden?
Staring at him, she tries to rise. He stretches out his hand and takes hers. Lavender, under her breath.
Mr. Hale.
Clement, drawing her down near him and looking into her face earnestly.
I love you, Lavender, with all my heart. Will you be my wife?
She shrinks away, still staring at him.
Speak to me. You don't mean no.
I don't know what I mean.
Think about it. Think about it. Here.
He gently draws her to him and clasps her in his arms. Lavender, half crying.
You oughtn't to love me.
Why?
You know I'm not a lady.
My dear princess.
I work. Ah, how red my hands are.
Because your blushes run down into them. When you're accustomed to being my wife, they'll grow quite white.
But look at me. My frocks can't keep secrets if I can. I'm very poor.
I'll be poor with you, if it comes to that.
Lavender, looking up into his face.
Are you poor?
I've nothing of my own, but my profession. I may become very poor.
Lavender, rising quickly.
Oh!
Clement, retreating a little.
Do you like me less for that?
Lavender, going towards him.
Less! I haven't said I like you at all, but if I ever did like you, it would be because I know how to be poor and could teach you the way to bear it.
Clement, drawing her to him.
My sweet, sweet Lavender.
Clement, you know how pale I've been looking lately.
Yes, that's why I asked Delaney to call.
Foolish boy, I shall have red cheeks tomorrow. I've been thinking so much about you, Clement.
Lavender.
Ah, don't laugh at me.
She sits upon the sofa, hiding her face. He goes to her and kneels by her side.
Why are you sitting amongst those books?
Mr. Fennell is obliged to sell them.
He shan't do anything of the kind. We'll stick to the old Dick, won't we?
Always. And we won't let Mother work any more, will we?
Never.
Ah.
Tell me again you love me.
I never will. You make me say things and then you laugh at me.
Bending her head to his.
I love you.
The curtain over the doorway is pushed aside, and Mrs. Gilfillian enters, followed by Minnie. Mrs. Gilfillian is a sedate, aristocratic-looking woman about 50, with a lofty forehead and side curls. Minnie is a handsome, lively young woman. Both are fashionably dressed. On discovering Clement at Lavender's feet, Mrs. Gilfillian clutches Minnie by the arm and takes her out. Clement and Lavender, with their heads close together, being unconscious of the interruption. There is then a loud rat-a-tat at the outer door. Clement and Lavender rise quickly, she dropping among the books, while he goes and draws the curtain and discovers Mrs. Gilfillian and Minnie.
My dear aunt!
Mrs. Gilfillian enters the room, followed by Minnie. Mrs. Gilfillian, much disturbed, giving Clement 2 fingers.
We found your door open, Clement, but I preferred knocking.
Clement, unhappily.
Delighted, aunt.
Mrs. Gilfillian walks straight across to Lavender, looking down upon her through her pince-nez. Clement to Minnie.
Minnie?
Well, Clem?
This is a jolly surprise.
Minnie, looking at Lavender.
Yes.
Lavender, having pushed the books out of the way, goes out of the room. Mrs. Gilfillian, looking after her. Minnie takes up one of the books, looking at it inquisitively.
Those are the books we slave at, Minnie.
Minnie, glancing at him, shyly.
Don't you overdo it, Clem.
Mrs. Gilfillian, looking after Lavender.
That's a wicked young woman.
She shuts the door and joins Clement as Minnie looks round the room.
We left Nice on Tuesday, Clement. Minnie and I came straight through, but Mr. Wedderburn prefers to dawdle for a week in Paris.
Handing Clement a packet of cabinet photographs.
He sends you those portraits done by Grutz of Monte Carlo.
Nervously.
Minnie, don't pry.
Clement, looking at the photographs.
Dear old governor.
Reading the superscription on one of the portraits.
For my boy, from Geoffrey Wedderburn.
To Mrs. Gilfillian.
The fact is, aunt, I've already heard of your return from a gentleman who was good enough to call on me.
Not Mr. Bream.
Horace Pinkley Bream.
Mrs. Gilfillian, sinking into the armchair.
Oh.
Minnie, sitting on sofa.
Oh, Ma!
We shall never shake him off. He saved Minnie's life in Paris by pulling her from under a tramcar in the Avenue Mirabeau.
Good gracious!
So careless of her to get there. I closed my eyes and in imagination heard the cracking of her bones. This person rushed forward and restored her to the sidewalk, as he will persist in calling the pavement.
I should like to thank him.
Don't. He'll never leave you if you do. I thanked him, although he's not at all the young man I would have selected to rescue a child of mine.
Clement, uneasily.
In London for long, aunt?
The season. We have rooms at the Metropole, but we shall eat at these new coffee establishments in Regent Street. Oh, will you oblige me by taking a shilling cab to the hotel and asking my maid Bodley for my vinaigrette?
Certainly.
He lays the photographs on the table and takes up his hat and umbrella.
You lunch here?
It's sent in at 1 o'clock.
We could remain if...
Clement, blankly.
Delighted.
Mrs. Gilfillian, to herself.
He must never be left again.
Clement, banging his hat on his head.
Confound!
He goes out. Mrs. Gilfillian looks to see that the door is closed, then rises and crosses to Minnie. Mrs. Gilfillian, with a gasp.
Minnie! My poor child! You saw that young woman?
I'm afraid I did, Mamma.
What were they doing? Oh, I've never felt my near sight so keenly.
Clement was kneeling, Mamma, in an ordinary way, and I think he was holding her hand.
Ah, I saw that.
and she was looking down in an ordinary way.
Mrs. Gilfillian, pacing to and fro.
In the very room in which we are asked to take luncheon.
Don't be cross, Ma, dear. She is very pretty and innocent looking.
Innocent looking? Do you think I will have my plans and my brother's frustrated by a girl with ulterior motives and eyes like saucers?
Look here, Ma, darling. Clement is grown up now, and may do just as he pleases. I am quite fond of Clem, always was, and if he asked me to be his wife, well, I should want to know all about that young woman. But I don't care a pin for Uncle Geoffrey's plans, and if Clem doesn't take to me, as I'm sure he ought to, why, bless him, I'll be his wife's bridesmaid and her friend into the bargain.
Mrs. Gilfillian, indignantly.
Minnie!
Suddenly.
Hush!
The handle of the door of Dick's room is rattled from the inside. Mrs. Gilfillian, with horror.
Minnie! There's somebody else in that room.
Minnie, retreating.
Oh, Ma!
And this is the law.
Dick, from within.
Clement! Clement!
Mrs. Gilfillian, listening.
It's a man's voice, or a deep contralto.
Locked in, Clement, my boy!
Mrs. Gilfillian turns the key in the door and retreats. Dick enters in the old and worn wig and gown of a barrister.
Thank you.
Enquiringly.
To see Mr. Hale?
Oh, I have seen Mr. Hale. May I ask?
Richard Fennel. Hale and I live together.
Dear me, I wish to speak to you immediately. Mrs. Gilfillian.
Introducing Minnie.
My daughter.
Minnie laughs behind her handkerchief at Dick's appearance. Dick, politely.
Heard of you?
Mrs. Gilfillian, quietly to Minnie.
Go away, go away. Perhaps this gentleman would allow you to try the piano.
Minnie, with a toss of the head, goes to the piano. Mrs. Gilfillian, to Dick.
Mr. Funnel, I have just received a great shock.
Minnie plays a sentimental air.
Who is the young woman who frequents these rooms?
Young woman?
We came in suddenly. A girl was seated on that sofa. Oh, Clement was on his knees before her, Mr. Funnel.
Dick, to himself.
He's done it. He's done it.
Minnie got me away somehow, unheard by either of them. But, my poor child. Mr. Funnel?
Tearfully.
The blow has fallen there.
Minnie strikes in suddenly with a very lively air.
Minnie!
Minnie stops playing, and Mrs. Gilfillian goes to her, remonstrating. Dick, to himself.
We're in for it. We've made our choice. We prefer linsey and a linen collar to satin and Valenciennes. Very well. Now it's come to it. I'll stick to you, Clement, my boy.
Arranging his wig and gown and striking a forensic attitude.
For the defendant.
Mrs. Gilfillian, returning to Dick.
What you tell me is in perfect confidence.
Not at all necessary, ma'am. We court inquiry. The young lady is the daughter of Mrs. Rolt, who resides, to put it plainly, in the basement.
A low woman?
Dick, pointing downwards.
Geographically, not otherwise.
Minnie resumes playing softly.
Nonsense, sir. These people attend upon you. This girl's mother is what you call a common servant.
No, ma'am. She's what I call a lady.
A lady?
Madam, Mrs. Rolt has been a kind, faithful friend to me for 15 years. If I have the privilege of knowing you for that length of time, nothing will induce me to speak ill of you.
Ruth enters and stands in the opening to passage.
I'll see Mrs. Rolt at once. Kindly ring the bell.
Dick moves towards the bell handle and sees Ruth.
Here is Mrs. Rolt.
Ruth, announcing.
Mr. Bream, please.
Horace enters quickly. Dick speaks to Ruth. Horace, with outstretched hands.
My dear Mrs. Gilfillian.
Minnie stops playing suddenly and rises.
Ooh,
Mrs. Gilfillian, in consternation.
Mr. Bream!
Horace, excitedly.
Lost you at the custom-house counter last night. Saw you in a hansom this morning. Never meant to rest till I'd found you.
Horace goes to Minnie. Mrs. Gilfillian, helplessly sinking into a chair.
Oh, dear me.
Horace, to Minnie, taking her hand.
My dear Miss Gilfillian.
Minnie, distractedly.
Oh, how do you do, Mr. Bream?
Ruth, quietly to Mrs. Gilfillian.
You wish to speak to me, ma'am?
Mrs. Gilfillian, rising.
Mrs. Rolt?
Yes.
I have discovered that there have been some love passages between Mr. Hale and your daughter.
Yes, my daughter has just told me that Mr. Hale has offered her marriage.
Marriage?
Checking herself.
Don't you understand that this is a terrible shock to Mr. Hale's friends?
Ruth, tearfully.
I understand that it is a terrible shock to me to lose my child.
Ruth turns away and leans faintly on the back of a chair.
To lose your child? I see.
To herself.
It's serious. I'll telegraph at once to Brother Geoffrey.
Mrs. Gilfillian seats herself at writing table and begins writing rapidly. Ruth's eye falls upon the photographs lying on the table. She stares at them for a moment blankly. Ruth, commanding herself, going a step or two towards Dick.
Mr. Fennel?
Pointing at the photograph.
Who is that?
Mr. Wedderburn, I think.
Wedderburn?
Banker at Barnchester. Mr. Hale is his adopted son.
Indeed.
After a pause, she goes quickly to Mrs. Gilfillian and whispers,
Madam.
Mrs. Gilfillian turns.
You have misunderstood me. I give you my word my daughter shall never marry Mr. Hale.
Mrs. Gilfillian, rising with the written telegram in her hand.
What?
Ruth, glancing round.
Hush.
Lavender enters the passage and takes up the tray from the butler's stand. Clement follows and stands whispering to her. Minnie and Horace are in close conversation. End of Act 1. Act 2 of Sweet Lavender by Arthur Wing Pinero. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The second act. The scene is the same as in the first act. A day has passed, and it is now evening. Dick, looking somewhat neater than before, is sitting in an armchair, smoking his pipe thoughtfully. Ruth enters quietly, carrying a tray with tea things and a letter.
A cab has just brought this letter for Mr. Hale. I'll place it here.
She lays the letter on one of the teacups. Dick rises and intercepts her as she is going out.
How's Lavy tonight? Any better?
No better.
Clement, in walking dress and carrying a handsome basket of flowers, enters hurriedly.
Any good news, Dick?
No.
Dick walks to and fro moodily.
How is she, Mrs. Rolt?
I fear just the same.
May I not see her for a moment? To call her at her door? I'll be quiet enough.
No, not yet.
Not yet, Mrs. Rolt. Still not yet. Oh, you mothers.
Oh, we mothers.
Clement, handing her the basket of flowers.
Give her these flowers with my... Say you know.
He drops disconsolately into the armchair.
Thank you. They are very beautiful.
She goes out. Clement then rises impatiently.
Dick!
Clement!
The idea tortures me that something is being kept from us. By Mrs. Rolt's manner, There is a mystery, Dick.
You're right, Clement, my boy. By some indefinable instinct, I feel we are being done, sir.
Dick hurls his pipe furiously into the grate and sits in the armchair.
Lavender loves me. I'll never doubt that.
Oh, she loves us right enough. We needn't distress ourselves on that score.
But this illness. I shall have red cheeks tomorrow, she said. Dick, meaning that she was well and happy. And then an hour afterwards, ill. Too ill to be seen, too ill to send me a word of comfort. Last night, worse. This morning, worse. Tonight, no better. Dick, it's unendurable.
Dick, rising with judicial solemnity and warming himself by the fire.
Well, you know, Clement, my boy, we may be unduly distressing ourselves. I say ourselves because in this case, Mr. Richard Fennel is with you.
Bless you, Dick.
We should remember that we are youngsters at this sort of game, that this is, in points of fact, the first time we have offered ourselves in marriage. For all we know, the prospect of an alliance with us would set up a condition of cerebral excitement in any young lady.
Taking up the poker to aid him in his argument.
No, Clement, my boy. It isn't Lavy's illness that puzzles me.
What then, Dick?
Why, the sudden self-satisfied affability of our aunt, Miss Gilfillian.
Ah!
Dick flourishing the poker.
There's an unpleasant air of truculent triumph in our aunt's demeanour that I resent, Clement, my boy.
And I too, Dick. And the incessant civility and attention I'm duty-bound to show Mrs. Gilfillian drives me mad. Good gracious, Dick! She and Minnie never leave me for a moment.
Our aunt is undoubtedly a barnacle, Clement, my boy.
They lunched here yesterday. You know.
I know.
Afterwards dragging me to the park for 2 hours in a ridiculous hired landau, and ending by carrying me off to a classical concert in the evening.
I feel for you, Clement, though I was at a smoking concert myself last night.
This morning, didn't they breakfast with us?
Our forthcoming weekly bill will testify that they did.
Then we went shopping in Bond Street, asked the price of everything, and had little cold veal pies for luncheon at a lady's confectioner's.
Dick with a wry face.
Oh, don't, Clement, don't.
After that we visited picture galleries, till I lost all patience, declared I was neglecting my studies, and rushed away to buy a few flowers for my dear one.
Well, Clem, perhaps it enables you to forget for a minute or two the poor little sick girl downstairs.
Ah, Dick, that's unworthy of you. Why, every street to me is Lavender Street. The newsboys shout nothing but Lavender, evening lavender. And the flower girls sell only sweet lavender from their baskets. The whole world is perfumed with lavender. And yet she and I seem so far apart, Dick. So very far apart.
There is a rat-tat at the outer door.
A visitor? Can it be our aunt?
Open the door, Dick, like a good fellow.
Dick opens the door. Minnie is outside.
Miss Gilfillian.
Yes. May I see Clement, Mr. Fennel?
I don't wish to dazzle you, Miss Gilfillian, but you may see both of us. Come in.
Minnie enters. She is handsomely dressed for the theatre.
Why, Minnie, are you alone?
Don't scold me, Clem. I've something I must say to you in secret.
But where's Aunt?
I've given poor Mamma what we children used to call the slip.
Ah, ha ha.
Minnie turns to Dick. He pokes the fire.
I beg your pardon?
Clement assists Minnie to take off her cloak.
I'm afraid you're dreadfully shocked, Mr. Fennel.
No.
While Mamma was dressing for the theatre, I stole away in a hansom. I've left a note for her on my table.
Minnie, suddenly serious.
It's awfully wrong.
Yes, it'll vex our aunt, Miss Gilfillian.
Minnie to Clement.
But Mamma will call for us here at 8:30, Clem, dear.
For us?
Why, haven't you received her letter?
Dear me, quite forgot. Letter for you somewhere, Clem.
Arranging the armchair for Minnie.
Miss Gilfillian, toss for the armchair? Try the armchair?
Clement finds the letter on the teacup and opens it, reading the letter disconsolately.
We have a box for 4 persons for the Cabinet Theatre to witness the new play about which people talk so much. The Sealskin Jacket. I hear it described as a salutary lesson to young men. We shall fetch you at 8:30. Dick, I'm getting desperate.
Dick, under his breath, grasping Clement's hand.
Bear up. We must continue to hold a candle to Aunt.
Why shouldn't you join us and help me through the evening? The box holds 4.
I know. Our aunt spread out in front and the rest looking at her hairpins. No.
Dick, you're unkind.
Unkind? Clement, my boy, have you seen my evening clothes?
No, Dick.
Thought not. The coat and waistcoat are in fair preservation, but the rest of it has been attending funerals for years.
Minnie, tapping her foot impatiently.
Clement?
I beg your pardon, Minnie.
Minnie eyes Dick and looks at Clement significantly. Minnie in an undertone.
Clement? Mr. Fennel?
Oh, yes.
Trying to attract Dick's attention.
Dick!
Dick, sitting at table.
No.
Dick!
Rather busy tonight, Clement, my boy.
Clement makes signs to Dick to depart, while Dick, thinking that Clement is renewing his persuasions with regard to the theatre, shakes his head. Clement, impatiently.
Dick!
Whispers to him.
Oh.
Shaking Clement's hand.
My dear Clement.
He snatches up a book from the sofa, a newspaper from the table, and a pipe and tobacco jar from the mantelpiece, and goes to the door of his own room. Innocently.
Can you spare me for 10 minutes, Clement?
Certainly, Dick.
Thank you.
He goes into his room. Minnie watches to see the door close, then lays her hand upon Clement's arm.
Clem, dear, I've come to see you alone because I must put myself right with you.
Isn't it I who should put myself right with you, Minnie?
Don't be polite, Clem, and unless you tell me you hate me, I shall cease to respect you.
Hate you?
Why, look how Mamma and I torture you all day by carrying you about with us. Aren't you in agony, sir, the whole time? What do you think you looked like this afternoon in McNabb's picture gallery in the Haymarket?
I was so horribly anxious, Minnie, about
your studies. Come, Clem.
She takes his hand and places him on the sofa, then sits on the head of the sofa, looking down upon him.
Let us be fogies for a moment. You know we were very fond of each other as children, weren't we?
Yes, Minnie, and...
Hush. Well then, dear, as we grew up, we grew out of our love, as boys and girls outgrow their clothes. Your love, as it were, got too short in the waist, and mine wouldn't meet at the buttons. And at last, one fine day, we yawned, Clem, and the seams of our affection collapsed.
Clement, taking her hand, embarrassed.
My dear Minnie.
Minnie, sitting beside him.
Ah, Clem, don't let us mourn for it. We're lucky to have yawned in time, dear. And so I want you to understand that I won't help to mend and patch an old attachment. I won't put an extra flounce or a new set of hooks and eyes on a garment a couple of children wore to rags years ago. There. That's what I call putting myself right with you.
Clement, tenderly taking her hands.
My dear sister, how compassionate you are to me.
Minnie, smiling.
And so you were on with the new love before you were off with the old, you bad boy.
I can't help loving her, Minnie.
And you're quite sure there's plenty of devotion turned up at the edge, in case you haven't done growing?
Ah, Minnie, I'm not so bad as that.
I've no faith in you, monster. But, Clem, I'm dreadfully afraid Mamma still thinks we shall make a match of it.
Laughingly.
Whenever Mamma is triumphant, her curls are always rigid, and today they're like little telescopes.
Whatever happens, Minnie, I resent Aunt's interference. I'm a man now.
Oh, yes, anybody can see that by the way you jilt people. But, Clem, dear, I wish you'd do something to please me.
I'll do anything.
Anything but marry me. Well, don't wait for Uncle Geoffrey's return, but write to him to the Hotel Rivoli in Paris, and tell him how you adore my hated rival. Uncle Jeff is a bachelor, but married men and bachelors are manufactured by the same process. Love, Clem, and he'll understand. Tell him all, and say that the girl you have lost your treacherous heart to has won one staunch friend, Minnie Gilfillian.
My dear sister, I'll write directly I get back from the theatre.
Putting his hand to his breast.
Shall I send him her portrait?
Minnie, pointing.
You've got one there.
How did you guess?
You silly boy. Show it me.
She sits in the armchair. He takes a small photograph from his pocket and hands it to her. Minnie, leaning back, scrutinizing the portrait with a great air of indifference.
So this is the little lady I saw yesterday in her best frock, is it?
Yes, I stole it from Dick Fennell's album.
A thief as well as a heartbreaker. And you consider her really pretty?
Say what you think, Minnie. I don't mind.
Why, she has only 2 eyes, as I have, and one nose and mouth just like me. Now, I wonder why you jilted me for Lavender.
You're only teasing me, aren't you?
Oh, I don't condescend to tease bad men. And what a very little girl she is. I see, it's economy. When you're married, you'll only keep a goat chaise.
Returning the photo.
She can't weigh much, Clem.
Less than my heart does tonight, Minnie. She's ill. Suffering.
Minnie, compassionately.
Poor boy. She'll be well tomorrow.
If anything happened to part us, Minnie, if I lost her...
Hush, Clem.
Taking his hand.
I'll tell you. When a girl knows she is loved by the man she loves, she has a charmed life. Her heart can't stop. If ever the elixir vitae is discovered, Clem, it'll turn out to be a bottle of something to keep a man and a woman in love with each other. There, run along and put its pretty things on for the theatre.
He kisses her hand and goes into his bedroom. Minnie, seeing the tea things.
Tea?
Putting her hand on the teapot.
Hot! I must take to tea violently now I'm going to be an old maid. Tomorrow I'll buy a kitten.
There is a rat-tat at the outer door.
Mamma, what a scolding's in store for me. Oh dear.
She goes to the door and opens it. Horace Bream is outside. He is in evening dress and carries a cane.
Mr. Hale?
Oh!
She leaves the door in a flutter.
Horace Bream! How awkward!
Horace closes the door and follows her into the room.
My dear Miss Gilfillian.
Minnie, uneasily.
I dare say you're surprised. Meet me here. I have missed Mamma, somehow. Perhaps you will call again.
Very likely. If you remember, I was here yesterday.
Minnie, embarrassed.
I mean, Mr. Hale may be quite 10 minutes.
I shall be perfectly charmed if he's 20.
Minnie, coldly.
If you decide to wait, Mr. Hale would like you to sit down, I'm sure.
Horace, bowing.
I'm sure he would.
Minnie, pointing to a chair.
Don't mind me, please.
She turns away abruptly and sits at writing table with her back towards Horace, to herself.
A man's the last creature to recognize the possibility of his being de trop.
Horace, moodily, to himself, as he sits on the arm of the armchair.
Well, the formality of an unmarried lady in England is perfectly chilling.
Minnie, to herself.
What does he think of my being here?
Horace, to himself.
I can't endure this a minute longer.
He crosses to the sofa where he sits watching Minnie. Minnie to herself.
How embarrassing! I wish I was buried.
Horace to himself.
If this continues for another 5 seconds, I shall shriek aloud.
I'll put a bold face on the matter. An American girl would be equal to twice this.
Looking angrily at the back of the armchair in which she supposes Horace to be, while he watches her with curiosity.
Bother!
Horace rises in surprise, and Minnie, peeping over the back of the chair, finds it empty, and turns, facing Horace with a gasp.
Oh!
In confusion.
Pray excuse my having left you for a moment. Will you have some tea?
Sitting. Horace resuming his seat.
I shall be perfectly delighted.
To himself.
In English society, while there is tea, there is hope.
Sugar?
Thank you.
Cheerfully to himself.
We have fairly started.
And milk.
Horace, after bowing assent.
We are a perfect congress.
Minnie to herself.
I wonder what he wants with Clem.
To Horace.
So glad you called to consult Mr. Hale.
Consult?
Minnie, handing him a cup of tea.
He's studying for the bar, you know. I thought perhaps...
Oh, yes, certainly. I require his opinion on a matter of extreme delicacy.
Minnie, looking away, chilled.
Oh.
Horace, watching her over his cup.
Congress has risen.
Leaning towards her.
Will you permit me to acquaint you with my delicate business?
Oh, really, Mr. Bream, I think...
Miss Gilfillian, you are my delicate business.
Minnie, rising quickly and haughtily.
Indeed!
Horace, contemplating her.
Now, how thoroughly characteristic that is of this old country.
Rising with his hat and cane.
Miss Gilfillian.
He goes to her. She moves away. He retreats, carefully choosing his position by selecting a particular spot in the pattern of the carpet with the end of his cane.
Miss Gilfillian, the time I have spent in your society, and in that of your delightful mother, has been extremely fascinating to me.
Minnie, distantly.
Oh, thank you.
Advancing a step or two.
I need not say I shall always remember gratefully the service you rendered me in Paris.
Pray don't allude to that.
He goes towards her. She retreats to her former position. After a slight pause, he identifies his particular spot on the carpet and returns to it.
But, Miss Gilfillian, I certainly did hope that those enchanting moments in Nice and in Monte Carlo, where I had the honor of instructing you in Trente and Quarante, might be continued in this dear old country. And that's why I'm here, to consult my friend Hale.
Minnie, firing up.
Pray, what has Mr. Hale to do with it?
Miss Gilfillian, you drove in the park yesterday, with my friend Hale.
Certainly.
I was there, hanging on to the railings. You were at Cristofaro's concert in the evening, with my friend Hale.
I was?
I was there, half over the balcony.
Really?
This morning, you were in and out all the stores in Bond Street. I was balancing myself on the curb. You had luncheon at a restaurant in Piccadilly, where they sell flies and other candies. It was there I partook of a last season's ice.
Minnie, losing her temper.
Oh!
I followed to every picture gallery within a mile of the Burlington, in the dark rooms of which I had a peaceful time. In fact, Miss Gilfillian, I have the honor to be always with you.
Minnie, angrily.
I never see you, sir.
I trust I know better than to intrude.
Where do you learn our movements?
At the hotel.
Minnie, indignantly.
You present yourself at our hotel?
You are staying at my hotel.
Oh, on the same floor, I presume?
No.
Minnie, sarcastically.
Thank you.
I occupy the room immediately beneath your own.
To listen to my movements?
To enjoy the consolation of conjecture.
Oh, I can't tell you how indignant I am.
Horace, to himself.
Well, I never thought a man could enjoy so much conversation with a young unmarried lady in this old country.
Oh, may I ask where you're going tonight?
I have a stall for the Cabinet Theatre.
With a blank look, Minnie sinks upon the sofa.
I shall tell Mr. Hale.
Ah, if you will allow me, I will tell Mr. Hale. I'm here for that purpose. I'm here to ask my friend Hale whether he's fortunate enough to be engaged to the most fascinating lady I have ever known. And if he says yes, I start for New York on Saturday.
Minnie, horrified.
But if he says no?
Then I shall ask permission to rejoin your most delightful party.
Oh!
Clement enters, dressed for the theatre.
8:30.
Minnie, much disturbed, runs up to him.
Clement, here is that Mr. Bream.
Eh?
Seeing Horace and nodding distantly.
How do you do?
Horace returns Clement's salutation with a genial wave of the hand.
How are you?
Clement, softly to Minnie.
What's he doing here?
Just what he does everywhere. He's the original little old man of the sea.
Stamping her foot.
He must be awfully fond of Mamma.
Clement to himself.
We can't snub him after his splendid behavior in Paris. Poor fellow. I wonder if he would join our theatre party.
To Horace.
We're going to the Cabinet Theatre, Mr. Bream. I'm sure my aunt will be very pleased to see you in her box if you...
Oh!
It holds 4.
Horace, shaking hands with Clement.
Sir, it shall hold one who is eternally obliged to you.
Minnie, distractedly.
It's fate.
Enter Dick, in dilapidated evening dress, old opera hat, and seedy gloves. Clement, surprised.
Why, Dick, I
hadn't the heart to disoblige you, Clement, my boy.
I have just asked Mr. Bream to take the 4th seat in the box.
I'm sure Mr. Bream will see that Mr. Fennel has the first claim.
Horace, bowing.
Oh, certainly.
To himself.
That's just cruel, anyway.
Dick, clapping his hat on the mantelpiece and hastily removing his gloves.
Couldn't think of it. Happy release for all parties.
Horace, throwing his hat in the air and catching it.
Ha!
Minnie, to herself.
It is fate.
There is a very pronounced rat-tat-tat at the outer door.
My mamma.
Horace, to himself.
And, I hope, mine.
Clement, to Dick.
That's Aunt, Dick.
Auntie, undoubtedly.
Clement, hesitatingly.
Will you,
No, Clement, my boy. I opened the door last. Your turn.
Dick joins Horace and Minnie. Clement goes to the door and opens it. Mrs. Gilfillian is seen outside, dressed for the theatre.
Clement, is Minnie here?
Yes, Aunt. Won't you come in?
Come in. Of course I'll come in.
Entering.
Minnie.
Mamma.
Mrs. Gilfillian, indignantly.
Don't speak to me. A young girl, you who taught in a Sunday school at Barnchester. Don't speak to me. What have you to say for yourself?
Clement, arranging the armchair for her.
My dear Aunt, I...
Go away, Clement.
Breathlessly, sinking into the armchair.
Oh, how did you get here?
A hansom, Mamma.
How dare you? An unmarried girl in a hansom?
They're quicker than four-wheelers, Mamma.
Quicker? They're faster. I never drove in hansoms alone till I was 33, and then I made the driver promise not to look at me through the roof.
They never do that when you're alone. Mamma.
Coaxing.
And indeed, I'm very sorry.
Sorry.
I wanted to speak to Clement, just by ourselves, there.
You haven't quarrelled.
Quarrelled? No. We understand each other better now than we have ever done.
Mrs. Gilfillian, patting Minnie's cheek approvingly.
Perhaps I've been a little too cross with you.
In a whisper.
But you must tell me everything tonight before you close your eyes. Mind, everything.
Yes, everything.
Mrs. Gilfillian, triumphantly to herself.
Settled. I'm sure of it.
Clement, looking at his watch.
Shall we start, Aunt?
Mrs. Gilfillian, looking at him beamingly, and boxing his ears playfully with her fan.
The carriage is waiting, you bad boy.
Unnoticed, Dick stands looking on.
I hope you'll forgive me, Aunt, for providing a fourth occupant to your box.
Not that Mr. Funnel.
No.
Mrs. Gilfillian, turning.
Oh,
To Dick, apologetically.
Mr. Bream, Aunt.
Mrs. Gilfillian, turning round and coming face to face with Horace.
Mr. Bream.
Horace talks to Mrs. Gilfillian, Dick chuckling at them. Minnie, quietly to Clement.
Clem, I must ask your advice about Mr. Bream, directly.
Delighted.
Assisting Minnie to put on mantle.
Bream, will you drive on with my aunt to the theatre? Minnie and I want to walk up to Briggs, the florist by Middle Temple Gate. We'll follow you in a cab.
Mrs. Gilfillian, to herself.
They have settled it.
Shaking her fan at Clement.
Ah, you sly boy.
Good-humouredly taking Horace's arm.
We're encumbrances. Come along, Mr. Bream.
Horace, ruefully to himself.
Damn.
He takes Mrs. Gilfillian out, leaving the door open.
Good night, Dick.
Warningly.
Word of honour, as usual.
Dick, to Clement, loftily.
Word of honour, as usual, Clement, my boy.
Good night, Mr. Fennel. So sorry you are not coming with us. Is the florist's far?
2 minutes.
We can make it 10 by going round. It's a fine night.
As Minnie and Clement go out, Bulger passes them and enters hastily. Clement, outside.
Ah, Mr. Bulger.
Clement closes the door. Dick turns and almost catches Bulger in his arms. Bulger, who is dressed in his best, is very agitated.
Mr. Fennel?
What's the matter?
Bulger drops faintly into the armchair and wipes his brow with a coloured handkerchief.
Excuse me for sitting, sir. Oh, Mr. Fennel.
I wish you wouldn't look as if you expected me to shave you, Bulger. You're not ill, I hope.
You and me has known Mrs. Rolt the same length of time, Mr. Fennel.
What of her?
There's no need for secrecy no longer, sir. I have regarded Mrs. Rolt very deeply for years, sir.
Bulger.
Ridiculous it seems, most likely. I don't deny it.
Of course, it's ridiculous.
I tell you I don't deny it, sir. But it's hard to keep your place in this world when the place is a mean, small one. And I have so far forgot myself concerning Ruth Rolt as to drop into poetry.
He produces a folded paper from his hat. Dick shrinks away.
No.
Don't fear, sir. But this evening, while hanging about the railings downstairs, more like a thief than an old established hairdresser, hoping for a chance to slip this into Mrs. R's hand, I saw what brought me up to you, Mr. Fennel.
What have you seen, Bulger?
Peering over the top of the blind, I see her little ornaments vanished from the mantelpiece, sir, and her few pictures took down. And...
Bulger, what does it mean?
It only means one thing to my mind. Ruth Rolt's a-going, Mr. Fennel.
Going? Going away?
Bulger, pacing distractedly up and down the room.
Going, after all these years.
Wait!
Dick runs excitedly up to the outer door, opens it, and goes out. He returns directly, drawing the curtain over the passage opening. Dick, breathlessly, holding the curtain,
Bulger!
Pointing to the door of his bedroom.
Get out of the way. Wait in that room.
Bulger goes into Dick's bedroom. The curtain is then pushed aside, and Ruth, in outgoing attire, looks in.
Mr. Fennel?
Dick, with assumed lightness.
Ruth!
I've seen Mr. Hale go out with his friends. Is there any chance of his returning till late?
They're off to the play. He won't be back till past 11.
She drops the curtain.
What's this? What's this?
Ruth outside.
Lavender! Lavender!
A Lavender!
Ruth pushes aside the curtain and enters with Lavender, who is also dressed for going out, while her face is pale, her eyes red with weeping.
Why, Lovey!
Ruth, pressing Lavender to her.
Don't speak to her. She can't bear it.
Ruth, what are you doing?
Running away, people will call it. But we're out of debt, so that doesn't matter. We've come to say goodbye, Mr. Fennel.
Goodbye, Ruth. Not goodbye.
Lavender gives a little cry of pain. Ruth places her in the armchair, then speaks to Dick apart.
You've been a kind friend to us for 15 years, Mr. Fennel, but I'd have gone without troubling you, because you won't understand. But Levy begged so hard to look at this room once more, and I trust you not to hinder us. I know I can trust you.
She leaves him and leans her head on the back of the chair, weeping.
You're not going to hide yourself away from Mr. Hale?
Lavender starts up with a cry.
Oh, yes, yes.
Mr. Hale, why did he ever come here to bring this sorrow on me, to rob me of my little girl's love? What is Mr. Hale to me? I was rich before he came, because of her. My poor rooms were warm and well furnished, all because of her. Yesterday any grand lady might have envied me, because of her.
Indignantly.
Mr. Hale, indeed.
Mother, I'm doing what you ask me, without complaining. But don't speak against Mr. Hale any more.
Speak against Mr. Hale? Who does? Ruth, who's at the bottom of this? I'll know before I let this boy's heart be broken as well as Lavy's.
Lavender goes to Dick and lays her head upon his shoulder, sobbing.
Oh, Mr. Fennel, will it break his heart? Will it? Will it?
Ruth to Dick despairingly.
You'll undo all I've done. Don't.
Dick puts Lavender from him gently. She goes and sits weeping on the window seat.
Now look here, Ruth Bolt.
Hush, Mr. Fennel. I'm deceiving her.
Deceiving her?
I'm forcing her to do this. I've begged to her, gone down on my knees to her, made her promise not to forsake me. I've told her that if Mr. Hale married her, his rich friends would turn their backs on him, and that he'd soon weary of a wife who brought him only poverty. I've taught her that a true woman best proves her love for a man by thinking of his future. But, heaven forgive me, that's not why I'm doing this. That's not why.
Then there's no reason at all, Ruth, and you shan't do it. I say you shan't do it.
Oh, pity me. I'll tell you. If Lavender ever married Mr. Hale, she would have to be told the secret of my life.
The secret, Ruth?
Yes. I pray for all women who hug such a secret to their bosom as I have always with me to keep me company. It would have worn me out years ago but for one blessing, one consolation, my child's respect for her mother. I've no right to it, but it has made my life endurable, even happy, and imagine what it would be for me to lose it now.
Dick holds out his hand. She turns and takes it. Dick, falteringly.
Ruth, did I speak crossly to you? Ruth, did I? I'm sorry. Ruth, forgive me. What a trouble and a worry I've been to you these 15 years.
Ruth leans upon the armchair, weeping. Lavender comes to Dick. Lavender, faintly.
Mother, may I sit with Mr. Fennel, if he'll let me, till it's time for us to start?
Dick, patting her head.
Of course, Lavy, of course.
Ruth, in a whisper to Dick.
Oh, tell her that what I do is right. I know she'll never love me again as she has loved me, but Be my friend and defend me, Mr. Fennel.
To Lavender as she is going towards the door.
In 10 minutes, Lavender.
Yes, Mother.
Dick following Ruth.
You won't confide in me where you're going, Ruth?
Don't ask me. Even she doesn't know yet. Goodbye.
Dick taking her hand.
Ruth! 15 years! 15 years!
I remember many, many kindnesses to me and my little one.
Raising his hand to her lips.
Goodbye, Mr. Fennel.
She goes out. Dick to himself as he goes to the armchair and sinks into it.
Goodbye, Ruth, goodbye. 15 years, 15 years!
Mr. Fennel.
Lavender.
Is it true, Mr. Fennel?
Is what true?
Mother says that Mr. Hale's friends would turn against him if he married me. Would they? She says that he'd dote on me for a time and treat me like a child does a doll, and then he'd grow tired of me and fret for what he'd lost by choosing a toy wife instead of a lady. Is that true, Mr. Fennel?
Love, you do ask such questions.
You know him very well. Perhaps he's talked to you a little about me. I'll believe you if you tell me I'm not fit for him. Is it true, Mr. Fennel? Is it true?
She breaks down and, sinking on her knees, bows her head on the arm of the chair and sobs.
Lovey,
Oh, it's not true, is it?
Dick with an effort.
Yes, Lovey, it's true.
Oh.
It's the way of the world for poverty to make us sour and unjust, and if Clem came to grief, he may lay it at the door of the little doll's house that contained the little doll he'd married.
Lavender rising and drawing back.
Oh, I don't believe that of Clem.
Dick starting up and following her.
No, nor I.
Ah.
Dick checking himself.
But your mother knows better than we do. Your mother knows better than we do. So you must go downstairs now, Lovey. It's quite time you went downstairs to your mother.
I wanted you to let me write a letter here, just saying goodbye to Clement, but now you send me downstairs.
Dick not looking at her.
Be quick, then, be quick.
Yes, I'll be quick.
She goes to the writing table and sits writing. Dick eyeing Lavender guiltily.
I'm behaving remarkably well to Clemens. I'm a valuable friend for a young gentleman to board with and confide in. I flatter myself. Ugh.
Lavender writing.
My dear, my dear.
To herself.
How can I call him my dear? He's not my dear.
She sobs. Dick hears her and starts, putting his fingers in his ears. Dick helplessly.
Why did I promise to help Ruth?
Oh, Clement, Clement.
Dick to himself.
Poor Clem. I shall never be able to look him in the face again.
He works his mouth as if his tongue were dry, then desperately looks into the teapot. Lavender writing.
It's for your good. I'm going away.
With another sob.
Ah.
Dick shutting the lid of the teapot.
Empty.
He starts up, looks round quickly, then goes to the sideboard, stooping down and opening the cupboard, while he glances over his shoulder at Lavender. Lavender resting her head upon the table.
Oh, I can't! I can't!
Dick takes a decanter of whisky and the carafe and tumbler from the sideboard and brings them to the table. Dick to himself.
The last time, Clement, my boy. The last time.
He pours some whisky into the tumbler and gulps it. It makes him cough. He looks round at Lavender guiltily, then draws the left side of the large curtain over the opening to the further room.
Only a thimbleful, Clement, my boy.
Pouring out more whisky and drinking it, then sitting and staring at the tumbler.
I've broken my word to Clement.
Drinking.
If Clement were to come back now, by chance he'd see me.
Suddenly,
He'd see her. Oh.
he drains his glass and rises excitedly.
Clement, my boy, why shouldn't you come back now, by chance?
He goes to the table and scribbles a few words on a piece of paper, which he hastily encloses in an envelope.
Bulger. Where did I put Bulger?
Recollecting,
Bulger!
going hastily to the door of his bedroom, opening it, and calling out in a whisper.
Bulger!
Bulger appears in the doorway. Dick seizes him and gives him the note.
Run up to Biggs's the florist. If you catch Mr. Hale there, give him that. Run, Bulger, run, run.
He hurries Bulger out.
Now I've broken my word to poor Ruth.
Weakly,
Bulger.
going to the door again, opening it, and calling faintly.
Bulger, don't run, walk.
Mr. Moore, a white-haired old gentleman in an Inverness cape, with a crisp, dry manner of speaking, appears outside.
Oh, I'm lucky, Mr. Fennel. May I speak to you on a matter of great importance?
Dick closing the door.
Mr. Moore, I think.
Yes, I am very late in leaving my office tonight, and seeing your light in your window.
Staring at Dick.
I hope you're well.
Dick drawing himself up with dignity.
Quite well, thank you. Take a chair.
Moore sitting to himself.
This man is in his usual condition, I'm afraid.
Dick drawing the right side of the large curtain to meet the left side, completely hiding the further room from view.
Excuse me, Lavy. 2 minutes, 2 minutes.
He walks with rather uncertain steps to a chair and sits, mixing some whisky and water. Moore taking some papers from his pocket, eyeing Dick.
Well, perhaps it's better. I really pity him.
Dick drinking.
Broken my word to Ruth.
Moore selecting from his papers a letter with a deep mourning border.
Mr. Fennel.
Dick with a wave of the hand towards the decanter.
Join me?
No, thank you.
No.
Getting quite muddled.
If you don't take weak drop whiskey and water after the labours of the day, when do you take weak drop whiskey and water?
Never, sir. Mr. Fennel, your late mother's brother, Mr. Vipone.
Uncle George.
Snapping his fingers indignantly.
I washed my hands of him 20 years ago on account of his habits. Should I say my habits?
Drinking again.
If you'd kindly postpone your supper till I've gone, I should feel obliged. Mr. Fennel, you will regret to hear that Mr. Vipont is dead.
Dick has his glass to his lips. He replaces it upon the table.
Poor Uncle George, a violently tempered man, Mr. Moore. All blame, but praise. Oh dear, no. Much might have been done by kindness.
Whatever lack of toleration your uncle displayed towards you, Mr. Fennel, he neglected to destroy a will made years ago entirely in your favour.
Dick rising unsteadily.
My favour? Will in my favour? My.
Moore raising his hand.
But Mr. Fennel.
Dick swaying to and fro over Moore.
But, I perceive, my poor uncle resembled his poor nephew. Never thought of the rainy day when he'd want £1 or 2 to die with.
I beg your pardon. I have a schedule here of bonds and other easily negotiable securities, deposited with his bankers, of the value of £25,000.
Dick with his hand to his head.
Wait, 25,000?
Beyond that, I trace a further 15,000 entrusted to these bankers for investment at their discretion.
Dick falls into his chair and gulps at his drink.
25,000? 15,000? 40,000?
But, Mr. Fennel, I've not yet told you everything.
Dick waving him away.
40,000, that's sufficient?
I've told you that Mr. Vipont's fortune was in the hands of his bankers.
Dick drinking.
Long life to the bankers.
It is the old tale, sir. Over-speculation, temptation, false balance sheets. Today the doors of the bank to which Mr. Vipont entrusted his fortune have been finally closed.
Broke.
Moore producing a telegram.
This telegram informs me that 2 of the partners have absconded. It's a bad business, Mr. Fennel.
Dick blankly.
Flight of 40,000 partners.
Taking the telegram from Moore and looking at it stupidly.
Uncle George's fortune.
Rustling the telegram and looking through it as if it were a banknote.
Largest banknote I've ever had in my life.
Sticking the telegram in his waistcoat pocket, Dick staggers across the room as the door opens, and Clement enters with Dick's note in his hand.
Dick!
Clement, my boy.
Clement comes upon Dick, who is sitting helplessly on the arm of the chair. Clement, starting back.
Dick, you've been drinking.
No.
Pointing to Moore.
Merciless, Mr. Moore.
Mr. Fennel isn't very well, I'm afraid.
The spirits are with you, Mr. Moore.
I'll see Mr. Fennel in the morning.
Moore goes out and shuts the door. Clement, pulling Dick up.
Dick, speak to me. What's the meaning of this note?
Banknote, Clement. 40,000 pounds.
Clement, shaking Dick's arm.
Dick, there's no bad news of Lavender.
Dick, slightly reviving.
Lavender. I remember.
Pointing towards the curtains.
Important letter from Lavender in the next room.
A letter? Thank you for sending after me, but I wouldn't have come back to see you like this. Not even for a letter from Lavender. Dick, I'll never trust you again.
He goes through the curtains, closing them after him. Dick, piteously.
Oh, do forgive me, Clement. Do overlook it.
There is the sound of a cry from Lavender on the other side of the curtains.
Ah, Clement!
Dick, listening.
You'll forgive me now, Clement, won't you? It's Ruth who'll never forgive me. I'll hide from Ruth. I can't face Ruth.
Taking up the decanter and tumbler and crossing to the door of his bedroom.
The last time, Clement, my boy. The last time.
He stumbles out as Clement comes through the curtains, supporting Lavender. He places her gently upon the sofa.
Dick, I didn't mean what I said.
Lavender, opening her eyes.
Clement!
Clement, bending over her.
Lavender!
The letter I was writing to you. Fetch it.
The letter!
He disappears through the curtain.
He mustn't find out tonight that Mother is taking me away.
Clement reappears with the letter.
Won't you give it to me?
By and by. By and by.
He gives her the letter. She thrusts it into her pocket with a sigh of relief.
My poor little sweetheart, are those the red cheeks you promised? Is this how you keep faith with me?
I meant to keep faith with you always, Clement.
Covering her face with her hands.
I'm not scolding you. How brave of you to struggle up all these stairs to ease my suspense. But won't you say that you're better? A little better? For seeing me?
Yes, But you startled me so, Clement.
Clement, putting his arm round her.
Why, what a delicate little flower it is, and how I shall have to tend it and nurture it all my life.
All your life. All your life.
She takes his hand from her shoulder and throws it almost roughly from her, then rises in agitation. Clement, startled.
Lavender!
Lavender, under her breath, clasping her hands.
Mother, don't take me away. Don't take me away.
Lavender, you're angry with me.
Lavender, pointing to the clock.
No, but I'd forgotten. Mother is waiting for me. Good night, Clement.
Ah, no, not yet.
I must. I promised. And Clement, you have been very troubled about me the few hours we've been separated, haven't you?
Troubled? If only you knew.
Well then, dear, I want you to remember, if ever we're parted again.
No, not again, Lavender.
I mean, if ever you have to go upon a journey, or I have to go a journey, I want you to bear in mind that my thoughts are true and faithful and loving to you.
My sweet Lavender.
And though I'm a poor commonplace girl and you're far above me, my prayers for you are just as good as any lady's, and they shall never cease night or morning. Never, dear, never, not as long as I live.
Taking the letter from her pocket and giving it to him timidly.
There's the letter I wrote to you. You must give me your word you'll not open it till the morning.
I do give you my word.
Let me see you hide it away somewhere, in the next room, or...
Clement with a smile.
Certainly. I'll lock it up there.
Going to the writing table and unlocking the drawer, he puts the letter away, talking, while his back is turned towards Lavender.
There. When I open this drawer tomorrow, these old bills will have doubled themselves with pride. What have they done to deserve such sweet company?
Seizing her opportunity with a last look at Clement, she goes softly up to the outer door. As she reaches it, there is a loud rat-tat-tat, and with a cry she comes back into the room.
Clement!
Clement, turning.
Hello. A caller for Dick, I expect. Whoever it is, he doesn't come in.
He goes up to the outer door and opens it. Mr. Geoffrey Wedderburn is outside. Wedderburn, heartily.
Clement, my dear lad.
Father!
With a low cry, Lavender disappears through the curtain as Wedderburn enters, while Clement, having closed the door, looks around for her. Geoffrey Wedderburn is a handsome, well-preserved man of about 50, with a ruddy face, a bright, cheery voice with a slight burr in it, and the air and manner of a prosperous country gentleman. He is dressed in tweeds and an ulster, as if from a journey. He throws his hat and gloves upon the sofa, then turns to Clement with open arms.
Come here.
Affectionately.
Lord, how glad I am to see you.
Clement, taking his hand.
Ah, Father. Now that I hear your kind voice, I feel how neglectful I've been. You look well.
Look well? Ha, ha, ha. I haven't a little love affair on hand, you villain.
Throwing his ulster upon the sofa.
Dad, you know.
No. All the world knows when a terrible chap like you is in love.
Clement, embarrassed.
I was going to write to you tonight.
Don't trouble yourself, Clem.
Taking a bundle of letters and papers from his pocket.
Your Aunt Clara's telegram gives a few interesting particulars.
Mrs. Gilfillian's telegram.
Why, what do you think has brought me from Paris in such a deuce of a hurry, eh?
And you're not angry, Father?
Angry? Now, have I ever been angry with you, my boy?
No, Dad, never.
No, and a plague of a child you've been, too.
Wedderburn, taking Clement's hand and looking into his face.
But the only time you really hurt me, Clem, was when you had the fever years ago, and I sat by your bedside through some dreadful nights, and you didn't know me when I spoke to you. Ah, Clem.
Clement, putting his hand on Wedderburn's shoulder.
Ah, Dad.
However, confound that.
Selecting a telegram from among his letters and looking at it through a gold-rimmed eyeglass.
So, she's the daughter of the laundress of these new chambers of yours, is she, Clement?
Clement, biting his lip.
Yes, father, but...
But she's very beautiful, eh?
She's very sweet, very good.
Wedderburn, reading the telegram.
Oh, I know, my dear lad, I know.
Father, would you like to see her? This evening?
Wedderburn returns his papers to his pocket and rises, putting his arm round Clement's shoulder.
Now, my dear Clement, why on earth should I see her?
Clement, under his breath.
Father!
Come, come. We'll have a bit of a jaunt together, you and I. They don't want me at the bank. I'm only a name there nowadays. But for form's sake, we'll run down to Barnchester in the morning, and then we'll cut away north and be lazy and happy. Look sharp. Tell your man to throw a few things into a portmanteau and come back with me to the hotel tonight.
Taking up his hat and coat.
Dad, you don't understand. I can never leave here until... Father, Lavender is to be my wife.
Wedderburn stands for a moment thoughtfully, then throws down his hat and coat and crosses to the fireplace, taking a cigar from his cigar case while Clement watches him.
Clement, my dear boy, my son, when I was a young man, old enough to know better, but a young man, I fell in love with a woman just as enchanting, I dare swear, as this Miss Lavender, as you call her.
Well, father?
She was a woman in humble life, but I loved her dearly. But just as I was on the point of marrying her, Clem, my hard, old-fashioned common sense pulled me back.
Ah, sir, why?
Why? Why, my lady would have been all elbows, as we say, among the starched gentlefolks of Barnchester. She would have been mercilessly cut by the whole county, Clement.
Then confound the whole country, sir.
Oh, by all means. But the neglect would have soured her and made me cross, and it would have been a damned wretched marriage. That's all, my boy.
Taking Clement's hand.
But, Clem, it nearly broke me up at that time, and to find some corner to hide my love in, I made a son of the child of a dear dead schoolfellow of mine.
Sir, I can't ever repay you.
Yes, you can. All the payment I want you can make me tonight. What I did for common sense years ago, you must do for me at this moment. So put on your hat and come along.
Goes to the sofa and takes up coat and hat.
I can't, Father.
You won't, you mean?
Father!
She or I? Which is it?
God bless you for all your goodness to me, sir. But she is to be my wife.
Dick calling from his room.
Clement, boy, Clement!
What's that?
Clement going towards the door of Dick's room.
Hush, Dick.
The door opens, and Dick staggers on, flourishing the telegram which Moore has given him.
Clement, look here! This telegram's from my solicitor, Luke!
Be quiet, Dick. Mr. Wedderburn.
Wedderburn?
May I ask the name of your friend?
Richard Fennell. We share these rooms together.
Wedderburn angrily to Dick.
Then, sir, I congratulate you on acquiring the undivided companionship of Mr. Clement Hale, who can now accompany you to the gutter with all possible speed.
The gutter?
The gutter, sir, which I take to be your destination.
The gutter?
Handing him the telegram.
Then we can give you a lift, Mr. Wedderburn.
Dick, be silent.
What's this mean?
Taking the telegram.
It means that Wedderburn, Green and Hoskett, bankers of Barnchester, have suspended payment. Broke, sir. 2 assoms.
There is a knocking at the outer door. Dick staggers up to it. Clement goes to Wedderburn, who stands gazing steadily at the telegram.
Father, you know better than to believe this.
The knock is repeated. Wedderburn is silent.
Father!
Dick opens the door and admits Mrs. Gilfillan, Minnie, and Horace. The two former, seeing Wedderburn, go to him, while Horace speaks rapidly to Clement. Dick, leaving the door open, joins them.
Geoffrey!
Uncle! Uncle!
Putting her arm round his neck.
There's some dreadful news in the paper about the bank, Uncle Geoffrey.
The paper. Send for it. Let me see it.
Geoffrey, it isn't true.
Wedderburn, with an effort.
Show me the paper.
Hearing a movement, he turns sharply and sees Clement reading from a newspaper which Horace holds.
You have it there. Give it me.
Mrs. Gilfillan sits weeping on the sofa. Minnie stands bending over her, consolingly. Clement gives Wedderburn the newspaper. After looking at the paper for a moment, Wedderburn, with a groan, bows his head upon the mantelpiece.
The villains! Dishonour! Dishonour!
Ruth calling softly outside.
Lavender!
She enters hurriedly.
Lavender!
To Clement, seeing all but Wedderburn.
Where is she? I want my daughter.
Clement disappears through the curtains. Wedderburn, hearing Ruth's voice, turns, and he and Ruth come face to face.
Ruth!
They stand staring at each other. Lavender comes through the curtains. With an effort, Ruth seizes her and goes out with her quickly. As they disappear, Wedderburn puts his hand to his eyes and staggers, and Clement, re-entering at that moment, catches him as he drops into the armchair, fainting.
Father! Father!
End of Act 2. Act 3 of Sweet Lavender by Arthur Wing Pinero. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. The third act. The scene is the same as before, but the time is a week later. Clement, looking weary and downhearted, comes from his bedroom. Clement, as he closes the door.
Father, I shall be with you in half an hour.
He takes up his hat, as Dick, improved in appearance, but without his coat, and wearing a housemaid's apron, and carrying a long carpet broom, a dustpan, and a hand broom, enters the room from the passage.
Going out, Clement, my boy?
Why? What are you doing, Dick?
I've had a terrible altercation with Mrs. McCostridge, the new woman downstairs. Really a disgraceful row, on her part especially. She said if I hadn't been a man, she'd have struck me. Oh, what a change.
Change? The house seems 100 years older, now Lavender is gone.
Yes, and 1,000 years dirtier, now Ruth is gone. However, poor Miss Gilfillan and Minnie shan't be put about, and so I rise to the occasion.
Placing the dustpan and hand broom on the sofa, and proceeding to turn up his shirt sleeves.
I've an excellent notion of thorough housework, Clement, my boy.
Dick, I'm ashamed of myself when I think what a splendid chap you've been all through this dreadful week.
Peh! Don't talk to me, sir. I certainly did prepare Mrs. Gilfillan's and Minnie's breakfast this morning. I don't deny that.
You!
My dear Clem, a man who is on familiar terms with every grill in Fleet Street ought to know something about cooking.
Resting his broom against the armchair, he takes up a covered dish from the table.
I don't wish to put side on over a few paltry, foolish kidneys, but...
Raising the dish cover.
Confound it, they haven't looked at them.
Clement, inspecting the dish with Dick.
I'm afraid they have, Dick.
Of course. Go on. Blame. But praise, oh dear, no.
He takes up the teapot and begins to sprinkle the tea leaves on the floor angrily.
If you're going out, I'll not detain you. I'm nervous when watched.
I have to meet Mr. Ma at 10:30 to hear the results of the meeting of the bank creditors at Barnchester yesterday.
Oh.
But the ship's hopelessly aground, Dick, and we shall never get her off again. Another bump or two and she breaks up. Few spars float out seaward in the shape of poor ruined depositors, and there's an end. And what an end! Driven onto the rocks by a couple of rows while the skipper is asleep below. There's a moral in it all, Dick.
Dick, sprinkling the tea leaves.
There is, Clement, my boy. The moral will possibly assume the curt and abbreviated form of sixpence in the pound.
Ah, you're thinking of old Mr. Vipont's fortune, Dick. Your fortune.
No, I'm not. Don't be so unjust, Clement.
You'd have been a rich man.
Clement, my boy, it would have been the ruin of me. There is an appropriateness about a poor vagabond, but a wealthy vagabond is an outrage to society.
Society makes 40,000 excuses for 40,000 pounds. While it lasts.
It wouldn't have lasted. It might have induced me to keep a cellar. Don't be sorry for me, Clem. Be sorry for yourself and your people, but not for a chap like me.
Clement, wringing Dick's hand.
Bless you, Dick.
Dick continues sprinkling the tea leaves.
I'll hurry back with the result of yesterday's meeting, good or bad.
Clement goes to the outer door, where he pauses.
I think the news will be a little better than you expect, Clement, my boy.
Singing with a few steps of a dance.
La-de-diddle, la-de-diddle, la-de-diddle-da.
Clement returning.
Oh, Dick!
Dick checks himself suddenly and comes down, letting the tea run out of the spout of the teapot.
Clement, my boy. Oh.
Replacing the teapot on the table and taking up the broom. Clement taking a slip of paper from his waistcoat pocket.
I think you ought to know that I'm going to leave this at the newspaper office for insertion in tomorrow's paper.
Reading.
Sweet Lavender.
Showing him the paper.
See, Dick? The first and last letters. All the rest stars.
Very ingenious.
Clement, reading.
R.P. I venture to use your initials, old fellow. R.P. entreats his old friend and her daughter to communicate with him without delay. R.P. is distracted at their absence.
Dick dubiously taking up the long broom.
R.P.
I make you figure in it, Dick, to avoid distressing Mr. Wedderburn while he's ill. You see, nobody can possibly object to your being distracted.
No, certainly not.
Whereas my poor Lavvy will understand, if ever she sees this, that it's I who am suffering. You don't mind, Dick?
My boy, delighted.
Clement, producing Lavender's letter.
I read her letter every hour of the day. To think that she imagined my love burnt so feebly that time or trouble could blow it out.
Dick, sweeping uncomfortably.
Uh-huh.
But it's so unlike her, Dick. I feel sure the confounded worldly philosophy was crammed into her dear little head by others.
Dick, sweeping wildly.
Oh.
My aunt declares it is all Mrs. Rolt's doing.
Returning the letter to his pocket fiercely.
I hope so, for if I ever find out to the contrary...
Dick sweeps up against Clement violently.
Confound you, Dick! What are you doing?
You're hindering me. You're delaying the housework. Go out.
Don't be angry with me. I'm going.
Clement goes out. Dick, wiping his forehead.
Phew. When he breaks out like that, I always break out like this. If he only suspected I assisted at the cramming of the philosophy.
Mr. Bolger comes from Clement's room carrying shaving paraphernalia.
Good morning, Mr. Fennel. I rather fancy as Mr. Wedderburn is a trifle better this morning. He demanded to be shaved up, sir. Always a sign of vitality in a gentleman.
He goes to the door of Dick's bedroom and has his hand on the handle when Dick starts up with a cry of horror.
Where are you going? Come back.
Good gracious, sir. I understood I was to go over Mr. Hale's chin. I'll presume he's sharing your room.
Oh, Lord, Bulger. Well, Mr. Wedderburn is here, nursed by his relatives. Mr. Hale and I billet ourselves at Chorley's Hotel in Surrey Street. We've handed that room over to Mrs. Gilfillian and her daughter. You should be more careful, Bulger.
I'm extremely sorry. Though, at the worst, I dare say as an old family man, I could have passed it off with a pleasantry.
There is a rat-tat at the outer door.
The doctor, I know.
I'll go, sir. No news of Mrs. Roll, Mr. Fennel?
Dick, taking off his apron and putting on his coat.
No, Bulger.
Bulger opens the door and admits Dr. Delaney, then goes out. Dr. Delaney, as he enters,
Thank ye.
Shaking hands with Dick.
It's Mr. Fennel. And how's our friend Wedderburn this delightful morning?
Pretty well for a man who appears to grow a year older every day.
You don't say that.
I do. It seems to me, Dr. Delaney, that your patient is aging on the tobogganing principle.
Ah,
But the ladies, Doctor, they come out gloriously.
Bless them, they always do.
I wouldn't have believed it of Aunt, Mrs. Gilfillian, but she seems to have bought the goodwill and fixtures of the business formerly carried on by Miss Nightingale.
My dear Mr. Fennel, all ladies are alike when trouble takes their hair a little out of curl. It's vanity and self-consciousness that spoil a woman, sir. But when once she says to herself, I don't care a pin how I look. Heaven takes care that she shall look like an angel. However, that's no business of mine. Elsie Wedderburn.
Oh, Dr. Delaney.
What is it?
Do you observe any marked improvement in me?
I'm forgetting you entirely.
Feeling Dick's pulse.
What news?
Not a drop for 7 days. That's a fearful drought, eh? I hesitate even at gravy.
And how do you feel?
A little weak, Doctor. A little diluted. But I'm firm.
You do very well. Mind now, don't think about it, and take plenty of exercise.
Delaney raps at the door leading to Clement's room, then opens it and goes out.
Exercise.
Removing his coat, then seizing his broom and sweeping violently.
Exercise.
Wiping his brow again.
Phew, this is rather dry and dusty for my complaint.
Sweeping.
But it's exercise.
Minnie, dressed and simply wearing a pretty white apron, comes from Dick's room.
Oh, Mr. Fennel, what are you doing?
Dick, panting.
Making up Dr. Delaney's prescription. Please return to your room for a quarter of an hour, Miss Gilfillian.
Minnie, retreating.
Oh, the dust!
Taking up the hand broom and dustpan from the sofa.
And look here!
Dick sweeps again. Mrs. Gilfillian, plainly dressed and without her curls, comes from Clement's room.
Mercy on us, what's this?
She throws open the window.
Mr. Fennel is sweeping, Mamma.
Sweeping? Where's that woman MacOstrich?
I regret to say that Mrs. McOstridge is in a condition of matutinal inebriation.
Oh, how horrible.
Oh, Ma, how shocking.
Ladies, it is far more shocking to one who may claim some affinity with the misguided person now occupying the basement.
Oh, Mr. Fennel.
To herself.
Poor man.
But this isn't sweeping, Mr. Fennel. This is stirring up.
No, Miss Gilfillian, it is sweeping. It is a shamefaced effort to sweep away a peculiarly useless and discreditable career. It is also an attempt to throw dust in the eyes of two good-natured ladies, that being the only method by which I can hope to obtain their good opinion.
Bless the man. Take his broom away, Minnie. Take his broom away.
Minnie takes the broom from Dick and goes out with it.
I wonder if I can guess what you allude to, Mr. Fennel.
Dick, resuming his coat.
I'll allow you 3 guesses, Ma'am.
On the night we heard of our misfortune, we saw you rather at a disadvantage.
Done first time. I suppose I presented a shocking spectacle.
Well, that's a week ago, Mr. Fennel. Now, Rome wasn't built in a day, but you can make a new man out of unpromising material in a week, and a new woman too, sometimes. Mr. Fennel, I'm not the woman I was a week ago, am I?
Well...
Am I, sir?
No.
I'm sure I'm not. Now I've lost all my money by the failure of the Barchester Bank, but somehow I've felt in a kinder temper the last week than I have for years. So I think, Mr. Fennel, to some natures, even bankruptcy may be a blessing.
Well, they both begin with a B.
As for you, my poor brother likes you. Says you read the paper to him so intelligently.
Holding out her hand to him.
And I like you. There, sir.
Dick taking her hand gratefully.
My dear aunt, I beg your pardon, my dear Mrs. Gilfillian.
Minnie enters, carrying 2 dusters.
So we'll forget a week ago, Mr. Fennel, for good. And if at any time you feel you want a cup of cocoa, I know an old nurse who'll make it for you.
Taking a duster from Minnie.
Come, child, let's get rid of some of Mr. Fennel's dust.
Dick to himself.
Aunt, who'd have thought it's aunt?
There is a rat-tat-tat at the outer door. Mrs. Gilfillian in whisper.
We're not visible, Mr. Fennel, to anybody.
Dick going.
No, certainly not.
We're out, Mr. Fennel, shopping.
Dick drawing the curtain over the opening.
I should rather think you were.
Hush!
Dick disappears behind the curtain and opens the door, while Mrs. Gilfillian and Minnie stand, listening. Dick at the door.
How d'ye do, how d'ye do?
Who is it?
Dick out of sight.
No, went out shopping about 10 minutes ago.
I don't know.
You'll find them both in the lower arcade. Oh.
The curtain is pushed aside, and Horace Bream enters. Horace, as he enters...
Smoke a cigar with you, Mr. Fennel, till they return.
Oh!
Minnie throws away her duster. Horace, seizing their hands...
My dear Mrs. Gilfillian, my dear Miss Gilfillian.
Dick returns much discomposed, gesticulating to Mrs. Gilfillian and Minnie, helplessly.
Would come in?
I am perfectly delighted to find that my friend Fennel was mistaken. I'm much earlier today than usual.
Minnie, embarrassed, shakes her head at Horace.
Earlier than usual.
Horace, not seeing Minnie's signs.
Yes, I invariably call to inquire after Mr. Wedderburn during the afternoon.
Minnie, turning away.
Oh!
I shall be here again this afternoon.
I haven't heard of your calling at all.
Oh, yes, Mamma. Mr. Bream has made the usual inquiries during the week, generally while you have been resting. His cards are somewhere.
Oh, yes, my cards are somewhere.
Dr. Delaney enters. Mrs. Gilfillian, angrily to herself at Horace.
Oh, this man.
She goes to Delaney, and they talk together. Minnie, eyeing Horace.
Oh, now he knows that Mamma didn't know.
To Horace with dignity.
I hope, Mr. Bream, that you will forgive Mr. Fennel's lack of candour in telling you that Mamma and I were out shopping.
Dick to himself.
Oh.
Perhaps it would have been better if he had explained that we don't receive visitors at this time of trouble and anxiety.
There now.
Why, Minnie.
She draws herself up and looks frowningly.
Miss Gilfillian, I never suspected that the happy hour we have passed together every afternoon this week has been on my part an intrusion, and on yours
Oh, I've made every excuse for you, knowing that you're an American. In trying to avoid formality, perhaps I've been a little...
Well, a little.
Dr. Delaney comes over to Minnie. Quietly to Minnie.
I've a word or two to say to Mr. Fennel. I don't want your dear mother to hear."
Minnie nods to Dr. Delaney and goes to where Mrs. Gilfillian is sitting. Horace, following, taps Dick on the shoulder.
Mr. Fennel.
Eh?
Dr. Delaney, bending over him.
"I fancy there's something worrying Mr. Wedderburn."
Well, I should think so.
"What is it?"
Sixpence in the pound.
"Ah, I mean something not connected with dividends at all."
Drawing Dick a little nearer.
"Mr. Fennel, I hear that Wedderburn has been rambling a little about the woman who used to live downstairs, talking about her in his sleep."
Oh, I dare say. This boy is in love with her daughter, and that troubles him.
"So Mrs. Gilfillian explains. But, Mr. Fennel, doesn't it strike you as rather odd that Mr. Wedderburn should dream less of his bankruptcy than of the woman whom I hear he happened to meet in this room a week ago, and who disappeared immediately afterwards?"
Eh? Why, what?
"Be quiet."
Mrs. Gilfillian, rising.
Minnie, I mustn't waste my time any longer.
Dr. Delaney, turning to the others.
One moment. I've got another patient here. Mr. Fennel has as much right to be ill as any of ye."
Dick, to himself.
What's he driving at?
Mrs. Gilfillian, Minnie, and Horace continue talking.
"Now, me dear Mr. Fennel, you have been acquainted with this Mrs. Rout for many years. Do you know her history, sir?"
No? Yes, a small portion of it.
"Thank ye. The small portion of a one's history which he confides to another is generally the index. Now, may I ask if the index in your possession goes down to the letter W?"
Dick, sinking into the armchair with his hand to his forehead.
Wedderburn. Good gracious, the possibility never struck me. Oh.
"But you perceive the possibility."
Don't pump me, Dr. Delaney, please. Confound it, you wouldn't ask me to betray a woman's confidence by even a hint.
"Not for all the world."
Taking Dick's hand.
"Besides, after all, perhaps this is no business of mine. Good morning, Mr. Fennel."
To himself as he takes up his hat.
"Now, if my theory is correct, I wonder if I could contrive to do a little good to a miserable man and an unhappy woman by a bold stroke. I'm inclined for the experiment. Mrs. Gilfillian."
Yes, Doctor?
Dr. Delaney, taking her hand.
"I've been thinking I shall have you and your pretty daughter on my hands if I don't take better care of ye."
There. Minnie shall go into the park every afternoon.
"Yes, and Minnie's mamma too. And so I've arranged to send ye one of the dear good ladies from my beautiful new home."
Now, Dr. Delaney, I've told you.
"Ah, no, just to enable you to get the amount of fresh air which every woman in her prime requires."
Well, do as you like, Doctor.
Dr. Delaney, shaking hands.
"I'll do that. Good morning."
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Mrs. Gilfillian, going to Dick.
But your nurse won't get a very cordial reception here, I'm afraid.
Dr. Delaney, to himself.
"No, that's just the point I'm a little curious about."
He bustles out.
I'll go to a registry office at once and hire a handy girl, if there's one in London. I won't have that degraded woman MacOstrich in these rooms again.
Turning sharply, she sees Minnie and Horace close together.
Minnie!
Horace leaves Minnie quickly and thrusts himself half out of the window.
Mamma?
When Mr. Bream has terminated his visit, perhaps in this hour of emergency you will remember there is such a place as the pantry.
Mrs. Gilfillian goes into Dick's room, which she is now occupying. Minnie looks towards Horace, whose body is half out of the window, then at Dick, then at her hands.
Washing up is awfully trying for one's hands.
I'll help, shall I?
What a good-natured man you are, Mr. Fennel. I'm so sorry I scolded you.
Delighted.
But it was quite necessary to read Mr. Bream a lesson.
Oh, quite.
But I couldn't think of allowing you to assist to wash up. I've got to be domesticated now, and I'd better begin at the degrading part.
Well, look here, let's halve it. One of us will wash, the other will wipe.
Minnie, glancing towards Horace, abstractedly.
It's very thoughtful of you.
Not at all. I take it for exercise. But mind, I'm only an amateur.
Not letting anything drop is the great secret. Which will you do, wash or wipe?
I'll do the wettest. That is, the wetter of the two.
You are good-natured, but both are equally unpleasant.
Let's flutter for who does which.
Flutter?
Toss a coin.
Minnie, glancing towards Horace with dignity.
Oh no, thank you, I couldn't do that.
Seeing Horace is still leaning out of the window.
Be quick, I don't mind.
Dick, producing a penny.
Now then, Britannia washes and the Queen wipes.
Throwing up a coin and catching it smartly. To himself.
I'm really very much better.
To Minnie.
Miss Gilfillian, sudden death, you cry?
What?
Sudden death, you cry.
Oh, how unkind of you to suggest such things when Uncle Geoffrey is so unwell.
You misunderstand me. I mean, you guess heads or tails.
Oh, head, please.
Dick, referring to his coin.
Woman, you wash.
The other is a little drier.
Very well, just as you like.
You are a good-natured man.
Looking towards Horace.
Mr. Bream is oblivious of everybody's existence.
Dick, knowingly.
Doesn't know that Mrs. Gilfillian has gone.
Mr. Fennel!
I didn't tell tales about you, did I?
Really, Mr. Fennel, I wish you wouldn't make such inferences. I won't trouble you, thank you.
She goes out indignantly. Dick calling after her, penitently.
I beg your pardon, Miss Gilfillian?
Disconsolately.
I'm always putting my foot in it.
Snatching up a ball of wool from the work-basket on the table and hurling it at Horace's back.
It's his fault.
Following Minnie.
Miss Gilfillian.
Dick goes out. Horace leaves the window and picks up the ball of wool.
Hello. Why, she must have thrown this. Ah, how playful she is at times. I bear no ill will toward Mrs. Gilfillian, but what a gay, high-spirited girl Minnie would be, if she were a thoroughly qualified orphan.
Looking round.
I guess she's hiding around here somewhere.
Minnie appears in the passage opening, wiping a cup. She peeps into the room and comes face to face with Horace. Horace, triumphantly holding up the ball of wool.
Ha-ha! You imagined I didn't see you throw this, but I did.
Minnie, coldly.
Really, Mr. Bream. Excuse me, I'm occupied in the pantry.
May I join you in the pantry?
Oh, no, certainly not. But if you wait here, Mamma won't be long.
She retires, drawing the curtain over the opening in Horace's face. Horace, angrily.
Mamma, I am becoming desperate. I can't sleep, I can't eat. I can't live on anything but hope, and this girl is just starving me.
Sitting disconsolately and looking up as Minnie draws aside the curtain and enters.
Ah, excuse me, I've come to fetch something.
He rises. She goes right round the room to the table.
Minnie!
Mr. Bream?
She takes up the tray with the breakfast things, and he intercepts her.
I think you are the cruelest girl in this old country.
When one meets reverses and becomes poor, one must expect to lose the good opinion of friends.
Horace, taking the other side of the tray and holding it with his hands over hers.
I don't call myself a friend, Minnie.
Indeed. Of course one doesn't know who are one's friends. Oh, you are hurting my hands, Mr. Bream.
You have never permitted me to be a friend. But you know perfectly well I am
An acquaintance.
No, a lover.
Mr. Bream, sir!
I repeat, a lover, a lover, a lover. There, I've said it.
Having said it, will you allow me to carry out the tray?
Permit me?
He takes the tray and places it on the table. She passes him and is going out when he turns quickly and, taking her hand, draws her back into the room.
That's not fair. You must say yes today, or I...
Or you start for New York next Saturday. I know. You were going to start for New York next Saturday when we first met you, months ago, if you remember.
Remember? My heart keeps a diary in red ink. Why don't you like me, Minnie?
How unjust! I like you as much as I can ever like any foreigner.
Foreigner?
I am essentially English, you know.
Oh, yes. The Wedderburns were originally Scotch, I believe.
Yes, I know, but...
And your father was an Irishman.
I know, certainly, but...
But you're essentially English. Don't make this an international question. If you marry me, I'll wear Scotch tweed, and you'll never find out the difference between.
Oh, thank you. I'm deeply sensible of the honor you pay me, but I really could not marry an American.
Why? You don't mind flirting with one?
Oh!
You know you're a very different girl on the stairs while your mother is asleep on this sofa.
And this is my reward for not disturbing Mamma? Only an American would throw stairs in a girl's face.
Miss Gilfillian, you are like the typical English gentleman who says, "Give me a homemade watch." Nobody does give it to him, but he pays 60 guineas for one, has his crest carved on it, and is borne down on one side with the weight of it for years. When it is not being cleaned, it enables him to lose his train. At last it is stolen from him in the crowd, so he swears a little, buys a cheap American timepiece, and lives happily. Miss Gilfillian, perhaps some day when you have won and worn your homemade husband, you'll give a thought to the cheap but reliable American who has now the honor to wish you goodbye.
I shall not say goodbye or anything after such unkindness. To be called a flirt. A flirt! Oh dear, it's so hard.
She takes up the tray from the table and backs towards Horace, who suddenly puts his arm round her waist.
Forgive me.
Forgive you? After such a cruel charge? Remove your arm, Mr. Bream.
Horace, clasping her to him.
I can't, Minnie, I can't.
And you know I can't drop the tray.
Struggling slightly.
Oh, how un-English! Mr. Fennel?
Dick outside.
Yes?
Dick enters, wiping a plate, and Horace retreats hastily.
Take this, dear Mr. Fennel.
Dick taking the tray.
With pleasure.
Minnie looks indignantly at Horace. Mrs. Gilfillian enters, dressed for going out. Looking from one to the other.
Minnie!
I'm teaching Mr. Fennel how to wash up, Mamma.
Dick to himself.
Oh, I like that.
Dick carries out the tray. Mrs. Gilfillian to herself.
That young man still here.
To Horace.
Mr. Bream, I shall be much obliged if you'll give me your arm across the strand.
Certainly. It will be the last opportunity I shall have of rendering you even so slight a service.
Minnie turns, listening.
Indeed.
I start for New York on Wednesday.
Minnie gives a stifled exclamation.
We're very sorry, though perhaps you have been wasting your time rather sadly.
That notion has just struck me. Please say farewell for me to everybody.
Minnie looks at him wistfully.
And tell Mr. Wedderburn that I have called every day this past week.
Looking at Minnie.
Solely to inquire after him.
Minnie retreats to the window seat. Mrs. Gilfillian, dubiously.
I'm quite ready, Mr. Bream.
She goes out. Horace, bowing profoundly to Minnie.
Goodbye, Miss Gilfillian.
She rises with downcast eyes and makes him a stately curtsy.
Goodbye, Mr. Bream.
She resumes her seat, looking out of the window. He goes to the door. Horace to Dick, shaking hands.
Goodbye, Mr. Fennel. Shan't see you again on this side, sir.
He follows Mrs. Gilfillian. Dick closes the door after them.
Oh, I didn't mean it! I didn't mean it! Oh, come back, Horace! Horace!
She sits at the writing table and writes rapidly. Dick comes into the room, polishing a teaspoon. Dick, eyeing Minnie.
A nice girl, but I am both washing and wiping.
Minnie, writing.
Never start for New York without me, Horace.
Rising with the note in her hand.
Give me something heavy to weight this.
Snatching the spoon from Dick.
That'll do.
Eh?
She screws up the spoon in the paper and runs up to the window. Minnie looking out of the window.
Ah, Horace! Horace!
She throws out the spoon and paper. Dick to himself.
That spoon belonged to my poor mother.
Minnie withdrawing from the window hastily.
Oh, Mamma's got it.
Glad to hear it.
Oh, Mr. Fennel, run after Mr. Bream.
Dick catching up his hat.
Certainly.
Giving her the cloth he carries.
You go on with the wiping. What shall I say?
Say I want him to inquire after Uncle Geoffrey as usual.
Dick opening the door.
I know. 3:30 on the landing.
No, no! Mr. Fennel, how dare you?
Dick returns, leaving the door open.
You needn't go, thank you.
Returning to the window seat.
I won't humble myself. I won't.
Lavender appears outside the room. She peeps in, then comes into the room, and seeing Dick, utters a cry and advances to him.
Mr. Fennel!
Dick embracing her.
Lavy! Why, Lavy, where have you come from? Where are you going to? What are you doing? Where's your mother? Why don't you answer me? Lavy, here, what? Oh.
Minnie coming from the window.
Lavender!
Lavender going to her.
Oh, Miss Gilfillian! Miss Gilfillian!
Minnie taking Lavender in her arms to Dick.
Shut the door.
Dick goes to the door and closes it. Minnie places Lavender in the armchair and removes her hat.
Oh, poor Clement! How happy he will be! How happy he will be!
Dick returning breathlessly.
I have to put a question to you, Lavy. Where have you come from? Where are you?
Oh, hush, Mr. Fennel. Lavender will tell me. Where have you come from, dear?
My question.
I've come from Miss Morrison's school at Highgate, where Mother took me when we left here. I've run away, Miss Gilfillian.
Run away?
Hush, Mr. Fennel.
Yes, but run away?
Be quiet.
Run away.
Hush.
Well, but run away? That's pretty serious.
I've seen a newspaper with something in it about a great misfortune happening to Mr. Wedderburn's bank, and how his partners have cheated and ruined him. And I know that if Mr. Wedderburn is poor, Mr. Hale is poor, and I can't rest till I've found out if it's true. Is Mr. Hale poor, Miss Gilfillian?
Yes, we're all poor now, Lavy.
Oh, Clement!
Even I do the work your little hands used to do.
I wash up.
Hush, Mr. Fennel, please.
Why didn't you drop a line to me quietly, Lavy? There'll be an awful trouble over this.
I began a letter to Clement yesterday, and the girl who lent me the paper and the envelope told Miss Morrison, who scolded me dreadfully. But I got out of the house. If it had been a prison, Miss Gilfillian, I should have got out, now that Mr. Hale is in trouble.
Here's a pretty kettle of fish. You know you'll have to be sent back, Lavy.
Nothing of the kind.
I'll go back when I've seen him for 5 minutes.
Mr. Fennel, you're positively heartless.
Heartless? I heartless? You don't know what I know. I mean, I'm a man. You're a couple of girls. A girl and a half, I may say.
With his hand to his head.
Oh, where's Ruth's secret going to now?
I admire your spirit, Lavender, if Mr. Fennel doesn't.
Ah, I've no spirit at all, Miss Gilfillian.
Minnie takes her in her arms and caresses her.
But Mother hid me away because I was too poor and humble for Mr. Hale. and so I was a week ago. But now everything's changed, and it would be dreadful if he said to himself, Lavender was taken away from me because I was rich, yet she can't find her own way back now that I'm in need.
Clem shall hear that from your lips within an hour.
No, he shan't.
He shall, Mr. Fennel.
Why, Mr. Fennel, you used not to be unkind to me.
No, Lavy, but neither of us is your mother. We must always consult our mothers.
Minnie, glaring at Dick.
Where is your mother, Lavy?
Dick, glaring back at Minnie.
Another of my questions.
I mustn't tell anybody. I've promised.
Very well. All you require in this matter is a friend.
Dick, putting his arm round Lavender.
I quite agree with you, Miss Gilfillian. A friend.
Minnie, putting her arm round Lavender.
A protector.
Yes, someone who wasn't born 2 or 3 weeks ago.
I'm of age.
Well, look at me.
But you're not a woman.
As it happens, as it happens.
A gong bell is heard striking twice. Minnie to Dick triumphantly.
Ha-ha! Uncle Wedderburn's bell, twice. It's for you to read the newspaper.
Lavender, frightened.
Is Mr. Wedderburn here?
Yes, we're all here. Run along, Mr. Fennel.
Miss Gilfillian, you will regret this interference.
Minnie, with her arm round Lavender's waist, saucily.
Regret is a woman's natural food, Mr. Fennel. She thrives on it.
Till it becomes remorse, Miss Gilfillian.
Which is only a mild form of indigestion.
Oh.
He goes into Clement's room. Minnie, triumphantly.
Ha-ha!
Assisting Lavender to put on her hat.
Now for poor Clem.
Oh, yes. Where is he?
Gone to the lawyer's. We'll run out and meet him on his way home, and then we'll sit down in the gardens.
What makes you so kind?
A fellow feeling. I'm unhappy in my love, too.
Lavender, putting her arms round Minnie's neck.
Oh, tell me.
He's Mr. Bream. I said no to him, and he believed me in a foolish American way he has.
Oh, we ought always to speak the truth. Why, directly Clement asked me, I said yes.
Well, Lavy, at a big dinner the sweets are always brought round twice, and I thought, I'm a wretched girl.
Don't cry, don't cry.
I forgot that if the sweets do come round again, other ladies have been digging spoons in.
Is he far away?
Yes, he's in the Strand now.
Let's go after him with Clement.
But wouldn't that look as if...
Yes, it would rather look as if...
Oh, then I couldn't.
Yes, but if we met him, we could walk past.
Minnie, hugging Lavender.
Oh, you darling! I'm so fond of you.
The door of Clement's room opens, and Geoffrey Wedderburn enters, followed by Dick, carrying some books and newspapers under his arm. Wedderburn looks much older than before, his hair being grey and his voice and manner feeble. Minnie to Lavender.
Uncle Geoffrey!
Lavender, clinging to Minnie.
Oh!
Dick to himself.
Oh dear.
Dick waves the girls away. Wedderburn walks slowly. Wedderburn, seeing Minnie.
Ah, Minnie, my dear.
Minnie, going to him.
Why, Uncle!
Wedderburn, patting her cheek.
Ah, I can't submit to be nursed and cosseted any longer. I shall go down to Barnchester tomorrow to face the people and to see about other things.
Seeing Lavender.
Who's that young lady, my dear?
Minnie, bringing Lavender forward.
This is a friend of mine, Uncle.
Wedderburn holds out his hand. Lavender puts her hand in his, timidly.
I'm very glad to see Minnie's friend.
Lavender, with a curtsy.
Thank you, sir.
I've been rather ill, my dear. but the doctor says I may go out into the gardens while the sun is out. Will you walk on one side of me with Minnie on the other?
I would, sir, if my mother would let me.
Your mamma will let you if she's a kind mamma. If not, I shall have to put up with Mr. Richard.
Dick assists Wedderburn into the armchair. Wedderburn gratefully to Dick.
And Mr. Richard's a dreadful fellow. Such a bear. Aren't you, Richard, eh?
Minnie, in a whisper to Lavender, pointing to the door of Dick's room.
That's my room now. Come with me.
The two girls go out quietly. Dick to himself, looking after Minnie and Lavender.
Girls will do anything. I begin to have a better opinion of myself now I've mixed more with girls.
Now then, Mr. Richard.
Dick taking up a newspaper.
What do you have, sir?
Anything referring to the failure of Wedderburn's bank?
Dick opening the paper uncomfortably, to himself.
This daily invention of favourable comments on Wedderburn's neglect of his business rather taxes my imagination. Ready, sir?
Yes, Mr. Richard.
To himself.
Hello, here is a short leader.
Reading.
It will not be difficult to find an excuse for Mr. Wedderburn's ignorance of the affairs of the bank.
Ah, that's good. That's just.
Dick to himself.
It will be difficult, they say here. Wonderful what a word does.
There is a rat-tat-tat at the outer door. Dick laying down the paper.
Excuse me.
Wedderburn to himself.
It will not be difficult to find an excuse for Mr. Wedderburn. An excuse for Mr. Wedderburn.
Dick opens the door. Dr. Delaney and Ruth, dressed as a nurse but veiled, are outside.
Thank ye, Mr. Fennel. Thank ye.
Cheerily pointing to Wedderburn.
Come now, look at that. That's the sort of constitution that's the ruin of my profession.
Dick closes the door. Ruth touches his arm.
Mr. Fennel.
Ruth.
Wedderburn, I brought ye a lady from my new home, just as a companion for your sister and Minnie. I've told ye about my beautiful home.
Thank you, Delaney, but I'm quite strong now.
I know that, but it's you strong chaps that require looking after. Think of the ladies. They're getting as white as the ceiling. And poor Mr. Fennel, who's hoarse with reading aloud to you. Mr. Fennel.
Beckoning to Dick. Wedderburn feebly to Ruth.
I hope I wasn't discourteous, ma'am. Every one is very good to me. Very good to me.
Mr. Wedderburn.
Wedderburn starts and looks up.
Who is it?
Ruth.
Ruth? Ruth?
I am the nurse that Dr. Delaney speaks of. Do you wish me to remain, Mr. Wedderburn?
Wedderburn with an effort.
Yes, Ruth.
He sinks back into his chair, staring forward. She removes her bonnet and cloak. Dr. Delaney, softly to Dick.
That's all right.
Aloud.
I'll be with you again in 10 minutes, Wedderburn.
Nudging Dick.
A delicate but successful experiment. Come, I'll tell ye how I put the pieces of the puzzle together.
Dick and Delaney go into the other room.
If Mr. Fennel was reading to you, shall I take his place?
Wedderburn passing his hand across his brow.
You are merciful to me, Ruth. You come to me when I am ill, broken, in misfortune.
It is my calling now to soften pain, to try to banish suffering.
But I ruined your life for you. Do you forget that?
No, I remember it. A week ago I had every reason to fly from this house where I had lived undisturbed and peacefully for so many years, But when the good doctor told me you were lying here, stricken down, I remembered.
Covering her face with her hands.
Ruth, my girl.
Ruth, recovering herself and laying her hand upon his arm.
I am forgetting why I am here. The doctor will scold me.
For what? For helping to ease my heart? Ruth, I have suffered. I have stared the world in the face as if I were an honest man, and bragged of my shrewdness and hard common sense. I have only been playing a loud tune to drown my conscience. I have suffered.
Hush, Mr. Wedderburn, hush. Not now.
Ruth, I have never forgotten the woman I betrayed and broke my promise to 18 years since. I have never forgotten the time when you asked me if I was ashamed of the poor girl who hung upon my arm in the lanes about Barnchester, and the answer I gave you. Your look of shame and reproach as you left me has been always with me, and it was the ghost of that look which struck me down here a week ago.
Burying his face in his handkerchief.
You've been too hard upon yourself, Mr. Wedderburn. You were right. I was not a fit wife for you. And now we are growing old. Forget it and suffer no more.
She breaks down and leans her head upon the back of the chair, weeping.
But why talk of my sufferings, Ruth? What have yours been?
Less than I deserved. Because you know, sir, Heaven had mercy upon me and consoled me.
Ah, I remember. They call you Mrs. Rolt here. You were Ruth Rawdon at Barnchester. You are a widow, with a daughter whom Clement has become attached to. I remember.
She goes back a step or two, staring at him.
Mr. Wedderburn, I am not a widow. I have never married.
Never married.
Oh, Mr. Wedderburn, I call myself a widow to keep my child ignorant of my disgrace. It would kill me for her to know. But Lavender is more than 17 years old.
Wedderburn, repeating the words to himself.
More than 17 years old?
Looks at her for a moment, then stretching out his arms appealingly.
Ruth, Ruth, tell me.
She slowly sinks on her knees beside him.
Geoffrey, I thought you guessed I had been faithful to my first love. I took my secret with me from Barnchester because I was too proud to beg for compassion. But when you found mother and child here, you might have guessed the truth.
Turning away, weeping.
How lightly you've always thought of me.
Wedderburn, taking her hand.
Ruth, I am utterly bankrupt. I have lost strength, fortune, comfort, all that makes age endurable. But what I've lost now is little compared to what I flung away 18 years ago. The love of a faithful woman.
Lavender enters with Minnie, both dressed for going out.
Lavender!
Lavender, going to Ruth.
Mother, dear mother, don't be angry with me. Mother!
Wedderburn, in a whisper to himself, sinking into the armchair.
My child.
Clement enters hurriedly. Minnie, running up to him.
Clement, look here!
Lavender goes to Clement and clings to him.
Lavender! Mrs. Rolt!
Ah, Clement!
Dick and Dr. Delaney enter.
Mother, I read that Mr. Hale had become poor, and I came here this morning to ask if it was true. It is true. There's no reason for separating us now. Clement, no one shall take me away again if you wish me to stay. I'll be poor with you. I'll share all your struggles. I'll slave for you. I'll be a true, patient companion. And if ever you're rich again and tire of me, as they say you will, I'll remember the days when you loved me and won't complain. I promise. Mother, you mustn't treat me as a child any longer. I'm a woman. I can't go back to Miss Morrison's. I won't. Clement, keep me with you. Keep me with you. Keep me with you.
There is a knock at the door. Clement putting his arm round her.
Forever, Lavender. Forever. Father, you here? Father!
Lavender sits in the window recess with Clement, and they are joined by Dick and Dr. Delaney. There is another knock at the door. Minnie opens it, and Mrs. Gilfillian enters, followed by Horace.
Mamma! Oh, look here!
Mrs. Rolt.
Minnie, seeing Horace...
Oh, Horace! Horace!
She embraces Horace impulsively.
Good gracious me! Why, Mrs. Rolt, you're surely not the nurse Dr. Delaney promised us.
Dr. Delaney, going to Mrs. Gilfillian and taking her hands.
Me dear lady, with the acuteness which is your characteristic, you've hit it. Mrs. Rolt came to my beautiful home a week ago. She didn't wish it known, and it was no business of mine to divulge it. But when I wanted to preserve the roses in your own cheeks, ma'am, it was Mrs. Rolt who volunteered to help in a work for which all humanity should be grateful.
Mrs. Gilfillian to Ruth, shaking hands with her.
Well, I'm sure I'm much obliged to Mrs. Rolt.
Looking round and discovering Lavender.
Why, here's your daughter.
Oh, yes, ma'am. We allow beautiful flowers in the sick room.
Pointing to the window.
If you keep the window open.
I did my best. Lavender has been away at school.
But the poor little thing chirrups for her mother. Hen and chick, ma'am.
And she follows you here. A coincidence.
Dr. Delaney, stroking his chin.
Coincidences occur in the best regulated families. The most delightful part of this one is that Mrs. Rolt happens to be an old acquaintance of Mr. Wedderburn's.
Old acquaintance?
Yes, Clara, an old acquaintance.
He rises, supporting himself upon Ruth's arm.
Clement, Lavender.
My secret, my secret. You'll not...
Clement and Lavender come to them.
Clara, my dear boy, and you, my dear girl, it is quite true. I knew Mrs. Rolt years ago when she was unmarried. This lady did me the honor to believe in me, to love me, until, very wisely, she perceived that I was not worth her devotion, and we parted. But, Clement, you are wiser, better, braver than I was. Boy as you are, you have secured the prize I missed, by discovering that the only rank which elevates a woman is that which a gentle spirit bestows upon her. Lavender, my dear, come here.
Taking her hand as she comes to him timidly.
Lavender, you will be my boy's wife, so you must try to forgive my old unkindness to your mother, and learn to call me father.
He draws her to him and kisses her. Then Ruth takes Lavender aside. Clement to Wedderburn.
Dad, didn't I describe her faithfully? Isn't she sweet and good?
Yes, Clement. But, Clara, what are we to say to Minnie?
There, don't talk about Minnie. I wash my hands of her and everybody else. It appears I know nothing about anyone or anything. I ought to have been buried years ago. As for my daughter, she throws a letter out of a window addressed to a gentleman. It falls into my hands, and I, having left my spectacles at home, actually asked that very gentleman to read it. Don't talk to me, anybody.
Don't be sorry about me, Uncle Geoffrey. Of course I've been very fond of Clem for many years, but I'm engaged to Mr. Bream now.
To Mr. Bream?
Minnie, looking towards Horace.
Horace, advance!
And how long has this been going on?
Well, it has been going backwards and forwards and all around for some months. But it has only been going on for about
10 minutes.
Horace to Dick.
Mr. Fennel,
Returning the teaspoon.
I am eternally obliged to you. Your property, I believe.
Oh, thank you.
Looking at the spoon.
Bad omen. Dented.
There's a rat-tat at the door. Clement opens the door and admits Mr. Moore.
Dad, here's Mr. Moore with the news.
Moore, breathlessly going to Wedderburn and shaking hands with him.
Oh, Mr. Wedderburn, I am pleased. I am delighted to acquaint you with the result of the private meeting of the creditors of the Barnchester Bank.
To Dick, who is walking away.
Don't go, Mr. Fennel, please.
Dick, coming to Moore uneasily.
Awfully busy. Back in 5 minutes.
Moore, holding his arm.
No. The principal creditors, animated by the example of one of their number, have resolved to put Wedderburn's bank upon its legs again, with every prospect of restoring confidence, sir, and discharging its old responsibilities.
Mr. Moore?
And who do you think has turned the tide of Barnchester opinion in your favour, sir?
Pointing to Dick.
Mr. Fennel, who has formally acquitted the bank of the liability of the amount of the late Mr. Vipont's fortune.
Richard!
Dick comes to Wedderburn, who takes his hand and sinks back into the armchair. Ruth comes quickly to Wedderburn. Mrs. Gilfillian, throwing her arms round Dick's neck.
Oh, Mr. Fennel.
Thank you.
Oh, what a lot of good there is in you.
Still clinging to Dick.
Be quiet, let me have my cry out.
Dick, quietly to Clement.
Clement, my boy. Aunt.
Clement to Lavender.
What did I always say Dick was?
Mr. Fennel, you are worthy of our side.
Minnie, impulsively kissing Dick.
Dear Mr. Fennel.
Thank you.
Leading her across to Horace.
I beg your pardon.
Mr. Fennel. Richard. You will not, I hope, refuse to make your home with us at Barchester? We live to repay you for your sacrifice, and we shall never cease to point to you as our best friend.
Thank you, Mr. Wedderburn, but I have no fancy for the searching light of the country. Notwithstanding some slight moral repairs, the seams of my coat are prematurely white, my character radically out at elbow. If you choose to continue my acquaintance, you will find me here, and if you'll be seen with me abroad, why, we'll walk down Fleet Street.
I share your devotion to this old city, Mr. Fennel. London has given me the most fascinating companion.
London, sir. Why, London contains the largest number of patients of any civilized city in the world.
And the best-hearted doctors in the world.
It is always very full of Americans.
Putting her hand in Horace's.
And some people like Americans.
Yes, we'll speak well of London. For in this overgrown tangle some flowers find strength to raise their heads. The flowers of hope and atonement.
Taking Ruth's hand and holding it. To Lavender.
What do you think, my child?
I think, sir,
Going towards Clement.
whatever Clement thinks, always.
And I agree with you, Father. London is a most beautiful garden.
Taking Dick's hand.
Hasn't it grown Dick here?
Drawing Lavender to him.
Ah, Dad, you can even pluck sweet lavender in the temple.
The end. End of Act 3. End of Sweet Lavender by Arthur Wing Pinero.